This is BBC News. I'm Christain Fraser, live at Westminster. The Prime Minister's fate is being decided right now. Conservative MPs have just begun voting on whether she should stay or whether she should go. Theresa May has just finished addressing Tory MPs at a meeting of the 1922 committee in the Commons. They're prepared to cast their ballots. She promised that she would not lead the Conservative Party into the next general election and will stand aside after delivering an orderly Brexit. This morning, as news broke of the leadership challenge, the Prime Minister spoke to the nation and vowed to fight on and deliver Brexit.
Delivering the Brexit people voted for. Building a country that works for everyone. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
Tension, division and uncertainty in Westminster tonight as 316 Conservative MPs cast their ballots, a secret ballot, in the House of Commons.
Theresa May spent weeks and weeks telling us this is the best deal she could possibly get. She has no credibility left in the House, she has no credibility left in the country, and she has no credibility left with the European Union for negotiating.
And with Brexit just over 3 months away, we'll be asking what this means for plans to leave the European Union. Very good evening and welcome to Westminster. It's been a day of high drama here, and the ballot in the last few minutes has just opened across the road in the House of Commons in committee room number 14. 316 Conservative MPs are being asked right now whether they have continued confidence in the leadership of Theresa May. Remember that she needs a majority of 50% plus one, that is 159 votes to continue as Prime Minister. That is the maths, but politically she'll be looking for much more than that, of course. And remember, if she wins, then they can't challenge her for another year. But if she loses, then you would think at 8 o'clock this evening, the leadership challenge will begin in earnest, and you will see a number of potential candidates coming out to talk to the cameras about what their plans are. But that is a long way away from us now. We have a special this evening at 8:30. Hosted by Andrew Neil tonight. We will bring you all the results as we get them. We should get the result around 9 o'clock this evening. But with all the details of a very dramatic day here in Westminster, here is our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg. I'm sorry, I don't think we have that report from Laura Kuenssberg, so we will move on. Let me just introduce you to our guests who are going to help me through the evening. Perhaps we'll get an easier start than we've just had here. Catherine Haddon, Dr. Catherine Haddon from the Institute of Government is with me, Senior Fellow. Hi. And also Henry Newman, who is a Director for Open Europe and a regular contributor to Conservative Home. Welcome to you both. Let's talk, Catherine, first of all, about what is going on right now in Committee Room 14. Talk us through it.
Well, they're being asked this question. You know, I have confidence in Theresa May as leader of the Conservative Party, and they then answer yes or no. And they're going in there. We've heard that the screens have gone in to turn the room into a sort of ballot chamber where MPs can go in and cast their votes. And
Henry was saying that the mathematics is that she needs 159 votes this evening, and she has said before that she'd carry on even if she wins that vote by one. But she'll be looking for much more than that.
She'll be looking for more than that. I think she can take comfort this morning in the fact that every single member of the Cabinet has come out and publicly backed her. And I think we're yet to hear from a public criticism of the Prime Minister from somebody other than the usual suspects. So we know that the Eurosceptic group, the ERG, have for quite a while now had some serious reservations about her Brexit policy. And the criticisms that we've seen today have come from them and not from any new figures within the Conservative Party.
Given that 110 MPs are out there voting against the deal that she's put before them, you would think there would be quite a significant vote that does go against her this evening.
Possibly, but remember there's different things that they'll be thinking about at the moment. I mean, first is whether or not trying to get her to change the policy is a better option, and the other is who's the likely successor, because whoever it is has got to have some kind of vision for the future of Brexit, and there'll be quite a few MPs who are worried about what potential successor could come to the fore. Conservative leadership contests can be quite volatile. They've then got got to go to the membership if they've got these final two candidates. So they'll be calculating what are the risks involved in doing that, what's the likelihood of a very different Brexit outcome, and also what's the likelihood of a general election.
Just looking at a tweet from George Freeman, who is quite loyal to the Prime Minister, or has been. He said that there was a powerful and moving moment in the 1922 committee in the last hour when Theresa May addressed the MPs. She said that she's heard, listened and respects the will of the party, that once she's delivered an orderly Brexit, she will step aside for the election of a new leader. That pledge to go before the next election, will that have brought some of the Conservative MPs across?
I think so.
To help her.
I was speaking to MPs this morning, and they were concerned that if the Prime Minister was given a mandate to stay, she might go on, to use Thatcher's expression. But what we saw today is Number 10 really throwing the kitchen sink at this. The Prime Minister came out earlier in the day where her spokesman was suggesting that she wouldn't fight the next election. She's clearly said that in the 1922 committee, I think twice, according to reports. But we also saw that the Conservative whip has been restored to 2 members who were suspended. And again, that's just to try to make sure that every single vote can be secured to get her through this.
And uppermost in her mind must be, or in the uppermost in the minds of the Conservative MPs must be the tweets that we've had from the likes of Sammy Wilson of the DUP today, that they can't support this deal. And if they don't support this deal and she pledges to crack on with it, they don't have a majority.
They don't, but that doesn't stop them being able to govern. That what they're trying to look is for a majority to get the deal through. Whether or not she at some points looks elsewhere for those votes, I mean, she's still got a core of her party who are unlikely to vote for her deal, whatever she does at this point. So she's got to find those votes from somewhere. So it's not just going to be down to the DUP, but she's sending signals that she's going to try again with them. What she comes up with, I don't know. But remember, the DUP will also be playing hardball on this. This is their final opportunity to get something happening with this, because a no confidence vote in a general election stops all of that happening for them as well.
We're hearing different things from different DUP members. We've heard Jeffrey Donaldson say that actually it's not a problem with the backstop overall. There's 2 specific elements of the backstop that he'd have an issue with. So it's not completely clear what changes that the Prime Minister might be able to secure to bring the DUP back on board. OK, Henry, Catherine, stay with me, because we're going to cross over the road and speak to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who has been watching events over there. And Vicky, it sounds like there was quite an impassioned speech from the Prime Minister in Committee Room 14 this evening.
Yeah, that's right. She went in there and reportedly said to them that in her heart she would have liked to have led the party into the 2022 general election, but she accepts that that is not what some in her own party want. So she is promising to stand down before that moment, and she says she is very much focused on delivering Brexit. Let's talk to somebody who was in the room, the Conservative MP Marcus Fish, who is with me now. Now, you are on the Eurosceptic wing of the party. What did you make of what she had to say to you in the last hour?
So the problem is that she said she will step down before the 22 election, but the issue is, for now, she can't command the confidence of the House of Commons and the DUP, who we have a confidence and supply arrangement with, for her main business, her main policy that she wants to get through, that she has insisted is the only way of doing it. Now, that means that it may come that there's not a confidence motion that can be defeated earlier than 2022, and colleagues in that room, I think, need to think really, really hard about whether they really want to go into such an election with her as the leader, because there are many colleagues with marginal seats who, in the context of the leader, through her policy, having abandoned manifesto promises, abandoned the biggest popular vote in democratic history in the UK by going against the referendum and not getting us out of the customs union, out of the single market. This is a very, very bad context in which to have a general election, and a lot of people will lose their seats, and I think it's very difficult to support her. She didn't really come up with anything new. She just said... I was
going to ask you about the Brexit policy itself. Obviously, that's what you have an issue with, as well as with her leadership. What would you have liked to have heard from her? What did she say about how she's going to deliver Brexit and get it through the House of Commons?
So she essentially just said, look, she will try harder in the future to involve more people in developing the policy. But I know from personally having gone in and out of Downing Street constantly between sort of September last year and May, June of this year, trying to get them to focus on the practical solutions to have a positive outcome to this, that they just are not interested in other people's points of view. So isn't the definition of madness that you keep doing the same thing and expect a different result? I wonder how. Well, I don't think she held the room with that plan. That wasn't really a plan, it was more of a feeling as to what she might need to do to persuade enough people to vote for her tonight. But whatever happens tonight, I think she will not be able to command the confidence of the House for this type of Brexit that she's been trying to pursue.
Just very quickly, do you think that she will win?
I don't know. It's notoriously difficult to predict, shall we say, electorate. It's the Conservative Party, parliamentary party in the middle of a leadership election is notorious for not necessarily being entirely open about what it plans to do.
And you obviously will be voting against her. You've made it very clear you're not happy with her leadership. But what does it achieve? There'll be lots of people from outside, voters, looking in and saying this is completely self-indulgent. This doesn't solve anything. By changing the person at the top, it doesn't change anything because the parliamentary numbers stay the same.
So it really comes down to what I was saying before. It is so important that we have the right leader in place so that we can set out the positive plan that we have for a self-governing and free trading future for the UK. And I think that if that can be done, and if we can rally around the alternative text of the Northern Ireland Protocol that we put on the table today, which we've been working on for many, many months, talking to the European Commission about, these are things that are possible. But we have to have a government that asks for them. And the people of the UK just won't forgive us in the longer term if we give up our independence, our sovereignty, if we go back on our manifesto promises. These are such fundamental issues. And all this talk that it'll take forever to get a new leader organised and the rest of it, I don't buy that. We can compress the process, get this done, and go back to the EU and have a great future as their friend, as two independent jurisdictions trading with each other and being allies and friends.
Okay, Marcus Fish, thank you very much indeed. So, of course, different interpretations of what went on inside that room, and we will find out at around 9 o'clock this evening what has happened with that vote.
Vicky, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. I'm pleased to say that Dominic Grieve, the Conservative MP and former Attorney General, has joined me here, and I'm grateful because I know you haven't voted yet, so we won't keep you long. Tell us, first of all, if she wins tonight, which seems to be the assumption at this moment in time, does that solve the problem for the Conservative Party?
No, it doesn't, because the problem isn't her leadership. The problem is inherent in the challenge that Brexit has produced for us. We've been given an instruction by a majority of the electorate. The Prime Minister's gone out and done her level best to try to negotiate a Brexit that minimises the economic risks which leaving the EU entails. And at the end of it, she's come along with a deal which is looked at by Parliament, and many colleagues, whether they are actually leavers or remainers, can see that it's flawed. For me, as a Remainer, it highlights starkly that leaving the EU is full of disadvantages, and quite frankly, we'd be better on staying in. For some of my colleagues, they have a view about what Brexit will deliver which is not reflected in this deal, and therefore they don't want it. I have to say, I think their view and vision of Brexit is a complete fantasy, but that's what they believe.
But they would say they are supported by the majority. That is what the country voted for.
Well, yeah. What did the country vote for? The country voted for an abstract idea.
They've been called extremists today, and they would say they are representing the vote.
I've never described my Brexit-supporting colleagues as extremists. I think they're misguided, and I think that the problems this country is heading towards are going to be very great. But if the public really want to leave on the Prime Minister's terms, then we must. I'm a Democrat, but we've got to put that to them and give them a choice, because that's what democracy is about. The risk we're running at the moment is that until we come face to face with our own responsibility in this, we're never going to solve the problem over the road because of the divisions in Parliament.
If she wins, there is a feeling, of course she can't be challenged for another year, but there is a feeling that she won't be pulled in policy terms by the ERG and the Eurosceptics on her backbenchers, because she will have that much more power come the end of tonight.
I hope that may be the case, because I happen to think that the ERG have been putting her in a direction which is leading to a dead end. But we will just have to see. I mean, like everything else in this, there are all sorts of imponderables, and I can't be certain. What I am certain about is that getting rid of her serves no useful purpose at all. And furthermore, she's entitled to my support, and I will do my best to give it to her, whilst at the same time remaining a critic of those aspects of her policy which I don't agree with.
So you're going to vote for her, but do you not worry at all that with her as leader and with this plan, which she doesn't appear to be abandoning, you don't have the support of the DUP, so you don't have a majority?
I think that's right, and the DUP's position is very clear on the Northern Ireland backstop, and that's why I'm afraid I think that the deal that has been brought to Parliament, I don't know what she will be able to negotiate at the European Council meeting, but I think it's unlikely to get through the House, and I think the sooner we get through that stage of considering whatever deal we've got, only then can we move on. Yes, I mean, these are lots of risks involved in all this, but at the same time, there should be a way through it if we're prepared to start debating properly the options.
If and when she wins and she goes to Brussels tomorrow for the summit, what does she need to do?
I have no objection her going to Brussels, pointing out to them the difficulty which the withdrawal deal poses and asking our EU partners if they're prepared to change it. I mean, I personally don't think they will. But I don't object to the Prime Minister making that request, and she's entitled to come back to the Commons next Monday and tell us where she thinks matters stand. But on the assumption that she is not able to get any significant movement, which I think is very probable, then we can't just delay considering the deal which she has and which she offered to the House last week. We've got to get that business concluded, and we've got to get it concluded before Christmas.
Dominic Grieve, it's good of you to come and talk to us.
Thank
We
you
will
very
let
much.
you go and vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, as I say, the voting will go on for 2 hours this evening. The ballot closes at 8 o'clock. So they vote in this committee room 14 over the road in the House of Commons. The votes will be counted in committee room 13. And the chair of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, says that he will give us the results somewhere, we think, around 9 o'clock this evening. We have sorted out the gremlins. So let's hear the report from our political editor, Laura Koonsberg.
A podium on the move, something big's about to happen. With 107 days until Brexit, number 10, ready for something else. Because this man had bad news for Theresa May. After months of arguments, now an actual assault on her leadership.
And it is for me to inform and consult with the Prime Minister. I did that over the telephone last night. And then to proceed with the ballot as soon as is reasonably practicable.
So the Prime Minister has to fight her own colleagues to keep her job.
I will contest that vote with everything I've got. And at this crucial moment in our history, that means securing a Brexit deal that delivers on the result of the EU referendum. Weeks spent tearing ourselves apart will only create more division, just as we should be standing together to serve our country. None of that would be in the national interest. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
Dozens of Brexiteers want her out because of her compromise with the EU. They just don't like it, and they want her to quit.
She's effectively a Prime Minister who's drowning, and Angela Merkel's being throwing buckets of water at her.
I've reached the conclusion that because the Prime Minister is unwilling to move away from a deal which I don't think delivers Brexit, and I cannot support, but I felt it was time for a new leader.
So there are many, many reasons, including public trust, as to the reasons why this vote of confidence is very necessary.
We felt we were really thrown out of the discussions, and she started going in a different direction. And she's finished up. The problem now is, though, she's finished up with a deal that commands so little support in the House of Commons.
The divisions in the Tory party, though, have turned British politics into a tourist attraction, puzzling many of the public, just watching on.
I feel sorry for her.
Do you?
I just don't know what's going to happen. Who's going to lead? They haven't got another leader, so no, I think they're wrong.
Well, stop fighting amongst themselves and get it sorted instead of arguing with each other all the time.
The Prime Minister sweeping down to Parliament for one of the most important days of her career. She has 9 hours from now to persuade her colleagues that she is the person to lead the country and has earned the right to keep her job. Even today, of all days, her place was at the dispatch box. It seemed for a moment Parliament was thriving on the chaos. The Prime Minister was arguing for her party and the right to stay.
Well, we all know one group of people that don't want to find a constructive solution. It's the Labour Party front bench. And that's what we see on the other side. That's what we see on the other side of the chamber. No plan, no clue, no Brexit.
Whatever happens with her Conservative leadership vote today, it is utterly irrelevant to the lives of people across our country. Will she now put this deal before Parliament and halt this escalating crisis, which is so damaging to the lives of so many people in this country?
This government is a farce. The Tory party is in chaos. The Prime Minister is a disgrace with her actions. The reality is that people across Scotland and the UK are seeing this today. Prime Minister, take responsibility, do the right thing, resign.
Tellingly, none of those who want her gone got to their feet. Strong words were directed at the rebels.
One of my constituents in Erdby has written to me to say, the Prime Minister has done a terrific job in trying circumstances. The headbangers from all sides and the supine attitude of the Labour Party has meant she's had an impossible job, but she's done so well.
Can my right honourable friend think of anything more unhelpful, irrelevant and irresponsible than for the Conservative Party to embark on weeks of a Conservative leadership election?
Those cheers can't drown out the criticism.
Will she win? I have an appointment just over there.
But for once, the circus outside Parliament starred currently loyal characters.
All the alternatives risk derailing Brexit or risk uncertainty and chaos. And I think that by voting for the Prime Minister, we can ensure that we have a united government ready to deliver.
But this is chaos.
No. This
isn't chaos?
No.
We need to back the PM, let her get on with the job and show the country that we are capable of grown-up government.
You know, when we leave here in the evenings, we're stepping over sleeping bodies in Westminster Tube Station. There are so many pressing issues for this government to tackle, and yet all of our energy is being sucked up, not just with Brexit, but now with an internal row.
But if the Prime Minister stays, peace and harmony is not on the way. Listen to how the Chancellor describes some of his own side.
And I think what this vote today will do is flush out the extremists who are trying to advance a particular agenda.
Extremists? Well, the two sides of the Tories meeting in there right now have been pulling themselves apart for decades over Europe. The expectation is the Prime Minister will survive this vote. But then what?
The Prime Minister has one last chance to get her MPs on side. Those who back her and those who want to sack her are gathering right in the heart of the House of Commons to listen here to what she has to say. And Number 10 is even suggesting she might tell them she'll quit before the next election if she's allowed to stay in place.
Tonight may well not be the end of Theresa May's time in office, but perhaps a sell-by date on her time in charge.
So, Laura Koonsberg there with all the latest details on what's been happening through the day. Let's tell you what happens tonight with the vote. So 317 Conservative MPs are voting in this secret ballot on whether Mrs May should stay on. We will know the result, as I say, at 9 p.m. tonight. The Prime Minister needs 159 votes to survive. If she secures that, then she's safe from any other leadership challenge for another year. But if she loses, it will trigger a leadership contest during which Mrs May will remain in power for the time being until a successor is chosen. Tory MPs will have to pick two candidates at that stage, and the new Tory leader will then be elected in a postal ballot of the wider Conservative Party. So that is how the contest would play out if Theresa May was to lose that ballot this evening. Let's speak to Christain Blackman from the Scottish National Party, who's joined me here. And of course, over the last few days, you have been pushing separate to this for a vote of no confidence, urging Labour and Jeremy Corbyn to call it. What progress have you made?
I mean, it's very clearly chaos. You can see from what's happening tonight that there is even more chaos within the Conservative Party. So we'll continue speaking to the Labour Party, we'll continue speaking to the other opposition parties, because we think that across the House there is no confidence in this government. I mean, the government can't even get legislation through. It doesn't even matter who's at the helm. They cannot get legislation through the House just now. I don't think the general public has got confidence in the government. I think it's probably time for a vote of no confidence in Theresa May.
Well, of course, a lot of people have made the point that even if she does retain the leadership tonight, it doesn't change the mathematics across the road. Is there anything that she could bring back from Brussels that would suit the SNP? I'm guessing not, as the Remainer party.
I think it'd be quite nice if they were to extend Article 50 at this moment in time, but do you know, any Brexit is going to be bad for our economy, it's going to be bad for us socially and culturally. We're going to be worse off as a result of Brexit. So we're arguing very hard that if the Prime Minister wants to proceed down this route, she needs to have a people's vote. She needs to put it to the people and ask them whether they want to remain in the EU or whether they want to go down this route of leaving.
You'll be conscious, though, that Jeremy Corbyn's not called the vote, because without the DUP, who have said that they would vote against the deal, but they would fall in behind the Conservatives in a vote of no confidence, the numbers just aren't there. So what is the point in calling it?
I think they've been a bit sketchy on some of that, actually. They said if the Prime Minister's deal was voted down, then they would support her in a vote of confidence. I'm not sure exactly where things are today. It certainly seems like she's trying to woo the DUP because she knows that she's on a sticky wicket without that. But I think it's really important that we talk about this people's vote, that we think about getting to that stage, and the Labour Party have said that there needs to be a vote of no confidence before they move towards supporting the people's vote.
Well, it's one thing to vote against the deal, but to then go through the parlour games of a no confidence vote in the government at a time when the nation is in crisis, is that really what people want?
This is the timeline that's laid out by the Labour Party. They want to have a vote of no confidence before they would consider moving to a people's vote. And we're very strongly of the opinion that we want the people to make the decision on this. So actually, if this is the route that we have to take in order for that to happen, then I think that's the route that we have to take. The other thing is that, a potential for a general election, and in that case you extend Article 50 and that you have a general election, hopefully get somebody running the country that is not going to take us out of Europe.
Just speculate for a second for me. Imagine a scenario that she wins tonight and then there is a vote of confidence called in her, and let's say for argument's sake that you win that. Is there a possibility that in fact she could be unseated even though she wins tonight?
She could absolutely be unseated even though she wins tonight. I mean, Margaret Thatcher previously won a confidence vote and then resigned. So it's not the case that she's in the clear if she wins in the vote tonight. And actually, it's also the case that she's still got this renegotiation that she's trying to do with the European Union on this deal that's going to fail whatever she does, whatever changes she makes. She's tinkering about with the backstop because she's concerned that some people have issues with that. Actually, the issue is with the whole of Brexit. The issue is that nobody in the Conservative government is acting in the interests of the people who live and work in this country.
But it's not just, of course, division within the Conservative Party, it is division as well on the Labour benches, and you'll know from engaging Jeremy Corbyn's team that there is no appetite for a vote of no confidence. So the gridlock continues in that sense.
There is an appetite. So there's about 50 Labour MPs have signed a letter that they've sent to Jeremy Corbyn saying we'd like a vote of no confidence in the government. So
yeah, but one of your team told me privately last night that he didn't think the message was getting through, that there's a bunker mentality within the leadership.
Well, we're trying very hard to work with the Labour Party on this, and actually we can only get a vote of no confidence through if the Labour Party brings it to the House and if they all en masse support that vote of no confidence. So we'll keep working with them and we'll keep making that case. It's not the case that, immediately people will change their minds just because of one conversation. So we'll keep having those conversations and trying to convince them to move a vote of no confidence in the government.
Christain Blackman, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you. Well, we are set to leave the European Union, of course, in just over 3 months on March 29th next year, and time is already running out to secure a deal. But if the Prime Minister were to lose the vote of no confidence this evening, it could dramatically change the path we take. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, John Pino.
They've been demonstrating here for months, rain or shine, for and against Brexit. Obsessed? Maybe, but they're also right to feel Brexit's the biggest issue facing Britain in decades. Bigger even than tonight's decision to keep on or sack Mrs May, to choose the leader who'll try somehow to break the Brexit deadlock. Theresa May would still be facing a deeply divided House of Commons, party and cabinet, still struggling to win over Brexiteers who fear the Brexit plan could leave Britain trapped by EU rules indefinitely. Some of them sit in cabinet. 2 have walked out since this was filmed. More of them are potential leadership candidates. And today, one Brexiteer warned a no-deal Brexit was still possible. And Mrs May, or presumably another leader, had to get more concessions out of Brussels or else.
It's very difficult to support the deal if we don't get changes to the backstop. I don't think it will get through. I'm not even sure that the Cabinet will agree for it to be put to the House of Commons.
Among the Cabinet's former Remainers, some would support a softer Brexit with closer EU links than Mrs May's, though they're not saying that. They are saying they'd fight against leaving without a deal, and the Commons wouldn't wear it. You've been clear in your view that a no-deal Brexit is not a runner.
I've been clear that the House of Commons will stop no deal. The fact that I think it'll stop no deal doesn't mean we shouldn't continue preparations just in case. Some people have pointed out it could nevertheless happen. But I think no deal would be such a bad outcome for the country that I believe the House of Commons will assert itself and stop it.
So far, though, there's no sign of European leaders giving Britain the kind of concessions that might win round the Commons. No sign of agreeing at tomorrow's EU summit. The UK could leave EU rules in its own time on its own terms. In Berlin today, the German leader spoke plainly.
We have
no intention of changing the exit agreement, Angela Merkel said. That's the general position of all 27 member states. And so it's unlikely we will leave these debates with any kind of changes. Today, Mrs May warned any leader would be short of time. The Brexit timetable is tight after tomorrow's summit. In the new year, before January 21st, the delayed meaningful vote in the Commons is due. If the government's defeated, it must report back on its plans for the next steps within 21 days. But any deal must also be approved by the European Parliament before it takes effect. Then, at 11 p.m. on March the 29th, the UK is due to leave the EU.
That's if Brexit isn't delayed, as the Prime Minister warned it might be, or the deadlock continues and other outcomes like a softer Brexit or a referendum come into play. Who holds the keys to number 10 is always hugely significant. But whether Mrs May survives or not, however long her time in Downing Street turns out to be, the biggest question of all, what's Britain's future, still hangs in the air. John Pienaar, BBC News, Downing Street.
Well, let's find out how this is playing in Brussels. We can cross and speak to our colleague Adam Fleming, who is there for us. The thinking, Adam, at the beginning of the week, that the Prime Minister was so weak here in the House of Commons that the European Union wasn't going to offer her something new because they wouldn't be sure that she could get it through the House of Commons. Might that shift if she were to win this vote of confidence tonight?
No, and actually you've put your finger on what Brussels is thinking about tonight. They're actually not focusing on this vote of confidence in Theresa May in Westminster. They are thinking about the summit of EU leaders that's going to take place here tomorrow, where Brexit is on the agenda. Theresa May, because they assume that she will still be Prime Minister, that's their working assumption, will be given an opportunity to update the 27 other leaders on what's gone on today, what it means, and crucially to ask for these reassurances that she wants about the Brexit deal that she can take back to the House of Commons to help get that deal through Parliament. So the focus is on that. And it's really interesting. You talk to diplomats and they say there are no legally binding assurances that the EU is prepared to offer her, because the only legally binding bit is the Brexit treaty. So you can't have a legally binding add-on to something that's legally binding to start with. And what they're cooking up tonight is a set of conclusions, yes, on black and white, on paper, but just restating what they've said all along, which is that their intention is to have an amazing future trade relationship with the EU, between the EU and the UK, that's really close. That means you might not have to use this infamous backstop, the backup plan for avoiding checks on the Irish border, which makes the deal so hard to get through Parliament. So already it's looking like Theresa May might not get exactly what she's been talking about before all this drama happened in Westminster about her leadership. But frankly, that is an issue for us to deal with tomorrow.
I was talking to some people today, Adam, who said that maybe she short-circuited the problem here, that because she pulled the vote and didn't go through and didn't draw the fire out of the House of Commons, that there's a certain amount of frustration there in Brussels, that there is a plan that maybe they could help at the other side of a vote, but because she pulled it, she's almost gone back to them too early.
I mean, the frustration in Brussels isn't because of anything that's happened this week. The frustration is just that the deal has still not got through Parliament. This is still a problem that is unresolved. So there's frustration on the one side, but on the other side, the EU thinks, well, you know what, this is a problem with the UK timetable. The UK were the ones that said, we've got to get this done at this point in the parliamentary calendar. The EU's always said, surely you've got a bit longer than this. But the fact is that the EU have been making 3 points to me behind the scenes when they talk about this, because they won't talk about it publicly, they'll only talk about it privately. And the 3 points are this. Number one, this is not Theresa May's deal, it is the UK government's Brexit deal, because the whole cabinet, all the senior ministers that work alongside Theresa May, signed up to this last month. Second of all, there is not some mythical better Brexit deal waiting to be done by a mythical better Prime Minister. This is what is on offer. That's it. And thirdly, the problem isn't the personnel at the top of the government. It's the fact that the British Parliament is massively, hugely split on the kind of Brexit it wants. In other words, Theresa May is not the problem. It's British politics that's the problem.
Yeah, a point that many have made across the road as well. Adam Fleming, thank you very much from there in Brussels. Henry Newman, Director of Open Europe, is back with me. Adam makes a very good point there, that the deadline that has been set for the vote is not their deadline, it is the British government's deadline. Do you think the strategy, the other side of this vote tonight, will still be to push this deal, to let time lapse and up the pressure?
I think the irony of all of this vote we're now seeing in the Commons over the road, is that the Prime Minister was actually trying to do what her critics were asking for, i.e. going back to Brussels and asking for a bit more. And she's been trying to do that, and they've pulled out the rug from underneath her. I think it's going to be very difficult for her to reopen the withdrawal agreement, but there are things that she can do on the side of that. She might be able to get some declaratory statements, some gentlemen's and ladies' agreements from the leaders of the EU, but she might also get some things which are legally binding on the side as well, to try to deal with some of those problems at the backstop. And that's what she's been trying to do. And she's still supposed to be going to speak to the Irish and speak to the French president, and then go to the council meeting at the end of this week.
Do you think, if the vote isn't overwhelming for her tonight, that it strengthens the hand of the cabinet? Because there has been some criticism that the cabinet hasn't been firm enough with her.
I think the problem is that the cabinet is divided. There's different. I mean, they're united behind the Prime Minister at one level, but there's also different views in the cabinet about what to do if this deal doesn't get through. Some might want to tack softer, some might want to tack harder, and that really reflects an overall position in the Commons. And we're seeing again, as we've seen now for many months, that there isn't a clear majority for any Brexit path, and that's part of the problem we're now in. The difference is, though, that the Prime Minister has a deal, and that's the only plan on the table. All of her critics over the road don't have a serious plan.
An alternative that would get a majority.
Their idea is to go to Brussels and say, no, thank you, we don't want the backstop. But Brussels is being very, very clear. There is only a negotiated agreement with a backstop, and that's not going to change.
Yeah, and ironically, that obviously keeps her in position. It's an unprecedented situation in that sense. With other prime ministers, when they've declared that they're going to leave at a set date, power just ebbs away. But I suppose the crisis is such in this country that she will be able to stay that much longer.
And arguably, unlike previous prime ministers who faced leadership challenges, she was already weak. She's been weak since that moment when she called the election over a year ago, and she came back without a majority. And she's agreed to stay, and actually her weakness has also been her strength, because she's been the only balance between these two different wings of the Conservative Party, which are trying to fight out the question of Brexit.
Yeah. Henry Newman, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. So what do people outside Westminster think about everything that's going on here, how the politicians are handling the Brexit process? The referendum result in Market Harborough in Leicestershire was 51% leave and 49% remain, and our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has spent the day there speaking to voters.
In this historic market town, plenty think it's about time things improve in Westminster. Market Harborough almost mirrored the national referendum result, backing leave, but not by much. And there's still division about how Brexit's been handled and the way ahead.
Just get it done and get out.
Barbara Pauline thinks Theresa May's been getting a hard time.
But at the end of the day, people want out. Whether we like it, you like it, that's the opinion of the country. So her colleagues should back her up.
What do you think about the idea of another vote?
No.
Yeah, but her colleague Ollie disagrees.
I think you should take her deal to the public and say, second referendum, remain, go back to pre-2016, or have Theresa May's deal and let the public decide from there. I don't think it should be left to those guys down in Westminster, because I think they've proven over the last 18 months that they don't get stuff done.
Down the road at the local Conservative club, members gathered at their Christmas dinner. Jim's a long-term Conservative supporter. He voted Remain, but accepts the referendum result, just not what's happened since.
For the last 2.5 years, they've done nothing but backbite and argue with one another. And we're in a shambles now.
Brexit backing Mick thinks the Prime Minister has been part of the problem.
I thought she'd be a Maggie, a bit stronger, but she ain't.
Do you still think Brexit's going to happen?
I don't know.
But for Sylvia, who's supported the Tories for almost 60 years, now isn't the time for change at the top.
All we can do is accept what she can achieve for us and make the best of a bad job. So all these MPs who want to vote against her, kick them up the backside and says, rally round her.
However you carve it up, there's no agreed way forward. Brexit's pulling people, not just politicians, in very different directions. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, Market Harborough.
Well, we've been joined by someone else who is going to cross the road and vote, and that is the Secretary for Health and Social Care, Matt Hancock. He's joined me here. Nice to see you.
Good to be here.
I presume that you voted for the Prime Minister.
I certainly did.
Right. Tell us a little bit about the speech at 5 o'clock. What was the atmosphere like in the committee room?
Well, it was quite emotional. The Prime Minister made clear that while she'd love to fight the next election, she knew that she couldn't. And she talked about how, especially after last year, she wanted to, but she recognised that that wasn't going to happen. She was absolutely crystal clear.
Is that her cabinet colleagues, the likes of you, who've been telling her that's just not possible?
Well, I certainly haven't made that case.
Well, who has?
I don't know, but that was what she said, and then she went through the very strong case for why she is the right person now to continue and complete these negotiations on Brexit, which she's in the middle of. You know, she was supposed to be in Ireland this afternoon, and there was a real warmth in the room. There were some questions, a whole series of questions, but a real warmth towards her. And I very much hope that colleagues like me are backing her in numbers.
But even if she wins tonight, there must be concerns within the Cabinet. We've just heard from Adam Fleming there in Brussels. They are not moving. They can offer some fine words, some clarifications, but nothing that is going to solve the problem across the road with regards to the deal she's brought back. So what are you going to do?
Well, we need to get the deal over the line. And
but how, if they're not going to change it?
So this is the nature of the conversations that the Prime Minister is having with other leaders, with Angela Merkel yesterday and Mark Rutte, and then further conversations tomorrow, and then the European Council. The key point is this. A deal isn't a successful deal until it's ratified by both sides, and the Europeans are clear that they want a deal. So we need to make sure that we can deliver a deal that gets the support of that building behind us, and that's what the Prime Minister, she was very clear, that is her goal now, hopefully, once she's won this vote this evening.
Not only does she need the support of her own backbenchers, though, she needs the support of the DUP. And quite clearly, from the tweets they've been sending out today, the likes of Sammy Wilson, their Brexit spokesman, they don't support the deal, and they won't support her so long as that is the deal.
Well, that's another important consideration, and that was raised in the discussion as well. And the Prime Minister is very clear about wanting to make sure that we have bring back a deal that works for the whole country, and so that's an important point.
Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, was pretty critical today. He said he was looking forward to this vote because, in his words, it would flush out the extremists. Is that the sort of language that is going to bring the party back together?
No, the Prime Minister was really clear about bringing people together, and it was really a conciliatory speech and discussion between, of course, people who put in letters calling for this vote over the last weeks and days, and also those of us who want to get on with Brexit, so that we can then get on to the big exciting agenda that we've got on the domestic front. I'm the Health Secretary. I want to get on with improving the NHS, making sure it's there for everybody in the long term. This is a government that is full of ideas to improve things for the country, and we want to get on to those, and that's why we need to get this deal and deliver on the result of the referendum.
I understand your cabinet meeting today was cancelled this afternoon, and it turned into a bit of a telethon. You were calling round MPs, everybody was hands to the pump trying to get people to support the Prime Minister. Is that what it's basically the afternoon has been devoted to?
Yeah, it's the nature of a vote like this, is that I believe very strongly that the Prime Minister is the right person.
So you were making the calls as well, were you?
Well, I was, of course, I was talking to some people. Yeah, everybody was. Yeah, when you have a vote like this, especially when it's happening that evening, it was called in the morning, happening that evening. Of course, you end up with countless conversations with colleagues, and that's how these decisions are taken. But I believe very strongly that the right result this evening in the vote is for the Prime Minister to get strong support, and so of course I was talking to people trying to encourage
and there was
others.
speculation that the vote was going to be held tomorrow, and it's been rushed. Well, this is super fast to hold it tonight. Was the thinking, the quicker we do this, the less time the plotters have to come up with
I have no idea. That was a matter for Graham Brady. But once those letters have gone in and the vote has been called, I think, especially in these circumstances, it's perfectly reasonable then to just get on with it.
Okay, Matt Hancock, it's very good of you to come and talk to us. Thank you very much indeed. We will see what the result is in, just over an hour and a half's time. The vote will close, and then we think an hour after that we will hear from Sir Graham Brady about what the result is, and of course we will bring you that live on the BBC. Well, let's find out what the City are making. Cross over to our business editor, Simon Jack. What's Sterling been doing today, Simon, while all this has been going on across the road?
Well, I mean, the pound is usually the canary in the business confidence coal mine, and it's been pretty volatile this week. Not extremely, but we saw it fall quite sharply when Theresa May deferred the vote into the new year. As one supermarket executive said to me, that puts us into squeaky bum time, channeling a bit of Sir Alex Ferguson there. Having said that, having fallen earlier in the week, the pound has actually had a pretty strong day, and I think that's on the back of two things. First is, the markets are taking MPs at their word that they're going to return Theresa May into with the keys of number 10. And also, even if she loses, there was a talk this morning from her Justice Minister that if she lost, you'd have to delay Article 50 and you would defer our exit from the European Union. A lot of people think that as sort of putting some sand in the engine, delaying the charge towards the cliff edge. So the sterling has had actually a pretty good day. But what that means is, a trader said to me, a Theresa May win is priced in. Now, what that means, and the markets aren't brilliant at predicting these political outcomes, that if she loses, you could see some pretty sharp moves downwards, because at the time that result comes out, it's in the twilight hours of trading in currency. That means it doesn't take many sellers or buyers to move the currency in either direction. So you could see some further volatility. Once it's over, even if she wins, what I'm told by business leaders is that we're back to where we were before, which is that we've got a deal on the table which no one thinks can get through Parliament. We've possibly got a divided cabinet. You're back to that kind of insecurity, that uncertainty. And business groups today have talked about utter dismay at this new fresh hell of a leadership challenge. But they've got these problems of how do you possibly plan for things when they are so uncertain. So tearing their hair out, says the Institute of Directors. So even if she wins, I expect the focus of the markets to go back to a situation where they still feel they've got a great lack of certainty, and businesses are doing their best to plan for these contingencies, trying to make small certainties in what is a vast vacuum of uncertainty.
Simon Jack in the City for the moment. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go back across the road and speak to Vicky Young, who has Sir Bernard Jenkin with her, who told me, Vicky, last night that he wasn't going to reveal whether he'd put a letter in of no confidence, but then this morning promptly told us that he had.
Yeah, well, I suppose these are fluid situations, and of course we will know the final result at 9 o'clock this evening. But meanwhile, the Prime Minister has addressed MPs in that room up there on the committee corridor, a packed room as ever, and seemed to be trying to reassure those unhappy with her leadership, that she wouldn't lead them into the next general election. Let's ask Bernard Jenkin what he makes of all of that. Were you in any way reassured by anything Theresa May said to you this evening?
Well, I'm afraid it didn't change my mind. I'm clear that I'm not supporting Theresa this evening, and it's not for any lack of admiration of her and undervaluing her commitment. But the situation we face is that the Conservative government has rather lost its authority to command the confidence of the House of Commons, and it's difficult to know how the government's going to carry on its business without completely refreshing its relationship with the DUP, because we haven't got an overall majority at the moment. We rely on the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party from Northern Ireland, to support the Conservative government, but they're very angry with Theresa May because of the deal that she brought back from the European Union, which they regard as a very deep betrayal of promises they made to them about the status of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom as we leave the European Union. And there is no sign that that breach can be repaired. She's gone back to Brussels to see what reassurances can be given, but there's no prospect of any substantial change in that draft agreement. And it's been confirmed by the European Union Council of Ministers office that they have again reissued a statement saying that they are not prepared to renegotiate. The only way to break this deadlock, I mean, the problem with
a new leader, what does a new leader give you, given the parliamentary arithmetic stays the same?
Well, that's perfectly true, but the one bit of the arithmetic that would change is the new leader would have to say, we're not having this agreement. And whatever happens, the agreement with these arrangements in it that so offend the status of Northern Ireland, and indeed David Trimble, who was one of the architects of the peace process in Northern Ireland and won the Peace Prize, he says these arrangements are a challenge themselves to the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement that ended the violence in Northern Ireland. This can't go forward in its present form. It has to be changed, and we have to be prepared to leave the EU without a withdrawal agreement.
But if Theresa May wins tonight, she then can't be challenged for another year. As you say, she doesn't seem to be changing her position on this deal, apart from getting some clarifications from the EU. You've mistimed this challenge, haven't you?
Well, there's never a good time for to try and in-flight refuel your administration with a fresh Prime Minister. But occasionally it happens at the worst times. I mean, the legendary moment in May 1940 when the Conservative Party in Parliament dumped Chamberlain and put in Winston Churchill. Well, I mean, this is a tiny child of a crisis compared to that. But that shouldn't prevent us from being agile and doing what is necessary. If the Prime Minister needs to change, it needs to be done. But the arithmetic would change in the House of Commons. And of course the authority of the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, would be very much stronger than the present Prime Minister.
Bernard Jenkins, thank you very much indeed. And MPs are voting. Of course, they have 2 hours to vote, so 1 more hour left for them pretty much to make their decision.
Vicky Young, Westminster, thank you very much indeed. Well, Dr. Catherine Haddon from the Institute for Government is back with me. We didn't talk much about what would happen if she loses, so let's just address a bit of that for the next few minutes. Let's say, for instance, that she does lose. How quickly do you think the Conservative Party could hold and finish a leadership election?
Well, they've said they're going to try and do it very quickly. The first thing that would happen is that they meet tomorrow, the Conservative Party's board, as well as, you know, Graham Brady, to try and work out how quickly they can do this. They've indicated they would have candidacies would happen very quickly to get the first ballot for MPs happening by next Tuesday.
Right, so before the recess they'd have to do it.
Before the recess, their aim is to get through multiple ballots by Thursday when the House rises for Christmas. That would then leave them however much time they've got for it to go to the membership. And normally that involves hustings, it involves them being able to send out materials, go around the country, do all of that kind of stuff. But again, they've said that they'll try and expedite it. So it could mean that a lot of Conservative members are kept very busy over Christmas, being inundated with lots of material, if that's the way they go.
Some of them have told me in the past, actually, in recent months, that they were very annoyed with the last leadership contest because they saw it as a coronation and they didn't get a full role in it. Just to explain, so they get 2 candidates that go to the country, and then the membership membership would vote.
Yeah, that's right. So they can have as many candidates as put themselves forward for that first ballots as they go through the MPs. But then it whittles down to 2 members who will then go off around the country. And last time round, obviously, it was Theresa May and Andrea Leadsom, but Leadsom dropped out, and that's why it ended up being Theresa May. So it's actually back to 2005 when David Cameron was elected was the last time that the membership got that vote.
OK, Rob Watson's just shuffled in. He's trying to keep us
Sorry
cosy.
about
If
this,
we all
Catherine.
get a little
Yeah,
closer, we might
very-
keep warm tonight. I don't know.
And I just gave it a good kicking.
Excellent.
So,
we noticed that.
Yeah,
we'll gloss over that.
One of my little touches, you know.
Slick. Tell us a little bit about what you've been discussing with people today. I know you've been trying to get a mood from across the road. What are you thinking?
Well, to take those who'll be supporting Theresa May, they are absolutely furious with what they would describe as the hardline Brexiteers in their own party. In fact, they would use language which was much stronger than that. And I've detected a certain sort of sense amongst the Brexiteers that they may not be able to pull it off. And what they do next, I think, is not entirely clear. But I take away a couple of things from all of these conversations. One is that the Conservative Party has a massive problem on its hands. I mean, we've said this so many times on BBC News, but they do. I mean, to describe the Conservative Party as divided over Europe is a bit like describing the Sahara Desert as sandy. It's sort of true, but it doesn't give you the full extent of it. And then the second takeaway is that even if Theresa May survives, and it's worth restating this, she still has the same problem, and the arithmetic over there in Parliament is the same, and those divisions over Brexit within the Conservative Party are the same, so it's sort of a square one.
Yeah, and just quickly, on the point that Christain Blackman from the SNP was making just a few minutes ago, even if she wins tonight, she could be unseated by the vote of no confidence, which comes if they hold that vote of no confidence shortly afterwards.
Yeah, and we're waiting to see whether or not Labour actually want to try and trigger that. And again, they would be running out of time to do that this time before Christmas. If they want, if they put down a motion, it still has to be timetabled, and there's a very few days left before they'll be able to do that.
Just quickly.
No, I heard a radical idea of a scenario that might happen next, that Theresa May finds that she survives, she can't get her deal through. She doesn't like the idea of pivoting towards Norway, a closer relationship with the European Union. So what she does, despite saying that she definitely wouldn't, is put her deal to the people in a second referendum. Just one scenario. I heard many others. My favourite? Who knows?
Who knows? I like it. Rob, Catherine, thank you very much indeed for the moment. So stay with us because we're an hour into that ballot. It will close at 8 o'clock. We will get a result around 9 o'clock. And of course, we will bring you that live here on BBC News.
Good evening. It's been a quiet week of weather so far, but with some clearer skies, it's brought a chilly feel. It's also brought some lovely sunset pictures, as you can see from this one sent in by Anne in East Yorkshire. Now, under those clearer skies, though, it will turn quite cold. The British Isles over the last couple of days really is the battleground between that high pressure into Scandinavia and frontal systems trying to push in from the Atlantic, but they're not making much impression. They will gradually bring a little more in the way of cloud and a few isolated dribs and drabs of rain into the far west. But elsewhere, it is going to be a coolish night with low single figures. And so a touch of frost not out of the question in sheltered rural parts. But that's going to be the story for the next couple of days. That weather front trying to push in, but the high pressure really keeping it at bay, and plenty of isobars on the charts, which means that the wind direction is coming from a southeasterly, a cold source at this time of year. And with a noticeable breeze around on Thursday, it will also feel noticeably cooler out there. A lot of dry weather in the story, and even some breaks in the cloud continuing with some sunny spells. But you've got to factor in the winds now, not just the winds, the direction and the speed. And so on your thermometer, well, it may well say 4, 5, 6 degrees, but if you factor in that wind direction, it is going to feel noticeably cooler out. Probably the coldest day of the week. All the time out to the west, we'll see cloud and a few showery bits and pieces of rain trying to squeeze in, but not making that much of an impression. Now, as we move out of Thursday, the winds will fall a little lighter, and with clearer skies, those temperatures are going to fall away, with the exception perhaps the Western Isles, Northern Ireland and the far southwest. Here, temperatures will hold up above freezing, but we could see a chilly chilly start to the day on Friday, the coolest start with a frost first thing in the morning, but largely dry. There's that frontal system trying to push in from the west. Now, with that cold air sitting across us, it could cause some issues late on Friday into Saturday. Eventually, that front looks likely to win the battle. And you can see for a time as it moves across that colder air, we could see some snow. Now, this is chiefly going to fall to higher ground across much of Scotland, northern England and North Wales, but there is the possibility of some of it falling at lower levels, so you certainly need to keep abreast of the forecast as we head into the weekend.
I'm Catty Kay in Washington.
I'm Christain Fraser in London.
Let's start with
the European Union. Brexit.
Russian interference.
Donald Trump's Twitter feed.
Yeah.
We'll move on.
I think there are going to be a lot of questions now.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fascinating to watch.
We're nearly out of time.
This is a big deal.
Beyond 100 Days, Monday to Thursday on the BBC News Channel.
This is BBC News. I'm Christain Fraser, live at Westminster. The Prime Minister's fate is being decided right now. Conservative MPs are voting on whether she should stay or go. Theresa May addressed Tory MPs at a private meeting in these chambers an hour ago, and she promised whatever happens, she would not lead them into the next general election. This morning, as news broke of the leadership challenge, the Prime Minister spoke to the nation and vowed to fight on and deliver Brexit.
Delivering the Brexit people voted for. Building a country that works for everyone. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
Tension, division and uncertainty here in Westminster tonight as Theresa May's leadership hangs in the balance.
Theresa May spent weeks and weeks telling us this is the best deal she could possibly get. She has no credibility left in the House, she has no credibility left in the country, and she has no credibility left with the European Union for negotiating.
And with Brexit just over 3 months away, we'll be asking what this means for the country's plans to leave the European Union. Very good evening from an extraordinary day here in London, where Conservative members of Parliament are deciding the fate of Prime Minister Theresa May. This morning, at least 48 of them called for a leadership challenge to be held, and as the news broke, the Prime Minister stood defiant in Downing Street and vowed to fight efforts to remove her with everything she's got. She warned that a change of Prime Minister at this point would put the UK's future at risk and could delay or even halt Brexit. Publicly, a majority of Tory MPs have said that they will back her, but as we know, this is a secret ballot. What they say in public and what they do in private are not necessarily one and the same thing. So, what happens from here? Well, 317 Conservative MPs are voting on whether Mrs May should stay on, and we would know the result around 9 o'clock, we think, tonight. The Prime Minister needs 159 votes to survive, so that's 50% plus one. And if she secures that, then she's safe from any other leadership challenge for another year. But if she loses, it will trigger a leadership contest. She cannot be part of that. And during that, Mrs May will remain in power until a successor is chosen. Tory MPs will have to pick two candidates. and the new Tory leader will then be elected in a postal ballot of the wider Conservative Party. Well, they have been in the room listening to the Prime Minister tonight. Cameras aren't allowed in Committee Room 14 where the ballot is taking place, but we have had tweets from Conservative MPs like the MP George Freeman, who gave us this insight as to what was going on. Powerful and moving moment in the 1922, he said, as the PM makes clear that she has listened, she has heard, and she respects the will of the party, that once she's delivered an orderly Brexit, then she will step aside for the election of a new leader to lead the reunification and renewal that we need. Respect. And that was indeed the same message that we got from the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, just a short time ago. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, reports on the day's dramatic events here in Westminster.
A podium on the move. Something big's about to happen. With 107 days until Brexit, number 10 ready for something else. Because this man had bad news for Theresa May. After months of arguments, now an actual assault on her leadership.
And it is for me to inform and consult with the Prime Minister. I did that over the telephone last night. And then to proceed with the ballot as soon as is reasonably practicable.
So the Prime Minister has to fight her own colleagues to keep her job.
I will contest that vote with everything I've got. And at this crucial moment in our history, that means securing a Brexit deal that delivers on the result of the EU referendum. Weeks spent tearing ourselves apart will only create more division, just as we should be standing together to serve our country. None of that would be in the national interest. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
Dozens of Brexiteers want her out because of her compromise with the EU. They just don't like it, and they want her to quit.
She's effectively a Prime Minister who's drowning, and Angela Merkel's being throwing buckets of water at her.
I've reached the conclusion that because the Prime Minister is unwilling to move away from a deal which I don't think delivers Brexit, and I cannot support, but I felt it was time for a new leader.
So there are many, many reasons, including public trust, as to the reasons why this vote of confidence is very necessary.
We felt we were really thrown out of the discussions. And she started going in a different direction. And she's finished up. The problem now is, though, she's finished up with a deal that commands so little support in the House of Commons.
The divisions in the Tory party, though, have turned British politics into a tourist attraction, puzzling many of the public, just watching on.
I feel sorry for her.
Do you?
I just don't know what's going to happen.
Who's going to lead? They haven't got another leader. So no, I think they're wrong.
Well, they'll stop fighting amongst themselves and get it sorted instead of arguing with each other all the time.
The Prime Minister sweeping down to Parliament for one of the most important days of her career. She has 9 hours from now to persuade her colleagues that she is the person to lead the country and has earned the right to keep her job. Even today, of all days, her place was at the dispatch box. It seemed for a moment Parliament was thriving on the chaos. The Prime Minister was arguing for her party and the right to stay.
Well, we all know one group of people that don't want to find a constructive solution. It's the Labour Party front bench. And that's what we see on the other side. That's what we see on the other side of the chamber. No plan, no clue, no Brexit.
Whatever happens with her Conservative leadership vote today, it is utterly irrelevant to the lives of people across our country. Will she now put this deal before Parliament and halt this escalating crisis which is so damaging to the lives of so many people in this country?
This government is a farce. The Tory party is in chaos. The Prime Minister is a disgrace with their actions. The reality is that people across Scotland and the UK are seeing this today. Prime Minister, take responsibility, do the right thing, resign.
Tellingly, none of those who want her gone got to their feet. Strong words were directed at the rebels.
One of my constituents in Erdby has written to me to say, the Prime Minister has done a terrific job in trying circumstances. The headbangers from all sides and the supine attitude of the Labour Party has meant she's had an impossible job, but she's done so well.
Can my right honourable friend think of anything more unhelpful, irrelevant and irresponsible than for the Conservative Party to embark on weeks of a Conservative leadership election?
Those cheers can't drown out the criticism.
Will she win? I have an appointment just over there.
But for once, the circus outside Parliament starred currently loyal characters.
All the alternatives risk derailing Brexit or risk uncertainty and chaos. And I think that by voting for the Prime Minister, we can ensure that we have a united government ready to deliver.
But this is chaos.
No. This
isn't chaos?
No.
We need to back the PM, let her get on with the job, and show the country that we are capable of grown-up government.
You know, when we leave here in the evenings, we're stepping over sleeping bodies in Westminster Tube Station. There are so many pressing issues for this government to tackle, and yet all of our energy is being sucked up, not just with Brexit, but now with an internal row.
But if the Prime Minister stays, peace and harmony is not on the way. Listen to how the Chancellor describes some of his own side.
And I think what this vote today will do is flush out the extremists who are trying to advance a particular agenda.
Extremists? Well, the two sides of the Tories meeting in there right now have been pulling themselves apart for decades over Europe. The expectation is the Prime Minister will survive this vote. But then what? The Prime Minister has one last chance to get her MPs on side. Those who back her and those who want to sack her are gathering right in the heart of the House of Commons to listen here to what she has to say. And Number 10 is even suggesting she might tell them she'll quit before the next election if she's allowed to stay in place. Tonight may well not be the end of Theresa May's time in office, but perhaps a sell-by date on her time in charge.
Laura Koonsberg reporting there. Well, with me is Dr. Catherine Haddon. She's a senior fellow at the Institute for Government, and also Henry Newman, who is director for Open Europe. Let's just talk, for those who are joining us this evening, about what is going on right now in Committee Room 14.
Well, we've heard that possibly 2/3 of Conservative MPs have already voted. They've been through, they've ticked the box, yes or no, do they have confidence in Theresa May as a leader, and then have gone out, a lot of them back here to do news. Some of them were over here and then having to rush back over there to go and vote. So I don't know whether they'll start counting when they know that all of the MPs have voted, or whether or not they'll wait for that 8 o'clock. It seems like they would get on with it, but we know that they're at the moment saying that they won't be announced till about 9 o'clock, and I believe that Theresa May will get informed beforehand.
Yeah, we've had a stream, as we saw in Laura's report there, stream of ministers out here today. We even had Michael Gove on the lunchtime bulletin. Not usual for him to appear on the green so early in the day. They've been lobbying for it in public, but of course in private, in a secret ballot, we don't know how they'll vote.
That's true. I think though, what the Prime Minister will be happy about is that all of her ministers have come out, all of her cabinet ministers have come out and publicly backed her today, and they're saying that very clearly. And what we've seen through the day is we've seen criticisms and critics popping their heads up, speaking to your colleagues here, but we haven't seen anyone particularly surprising, a sort of switch, somebody that would be perhaps worrying for Number 10. On the other hand, the Prime Minister did have this question-answer session at the Backbench 1922 Committee, and I spoke to a senior backbencher who was there. They said she did well, but not brilliantly. She looked tired, perhaps unsurprisingly, and a little bit chippy. So I think it is still up in the air. She's expected to win, but we just don't know.
Does it matter, Catherine, the margin of victory? If she only needs to win by one, yeah. But is that enough?
With Theresa May, it may well be, because she's often right on the edge and somehow managing to sort of keep going through all of this. We've had, managing to get through stalling the meaningful vote on Monday was a big move for her. So it could well be that it's enough. This is very different from previous Conservative conferences. Thatcher, it was a shock that she was losing her control of the party. Suddenly her cabinet were all saying, no, you have to go now. Whereas Theresa May, we've always known she's had her critics. We've always known quite a rump of her party have a big problem with the direction of her policy.
But you'll know, Henry, that there has been a lot of plotting through the week. I mean, while the emergency debate was going on the other day, there were no senior figures on the front benches. There were reports of meetings in committee rooms, senior figures meeting with the DUP. Do you get a sense that there has been a sort of build-up to this since the vote was pulled?
Well, this isn't surprising. I mean, in fact, we expected to see a vote of no confidence several weeks back when the first sort of round of ERG letters, the Eurosceptic research group, started putting in letters and saying they were going to trigger a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, and that didn't happen. So Number 10 had been ready for this and prepared for it. There were also discussions in Number 10 about whether she should announce, which she finally did today, at some point, that she wouldn't be fighting the next election. Of course, that's part of the throwing the kitchen sink strategy that we've seen from Downing Street, just to try to give everything to this vote and really try to win it. I think also we're in unusual times, just as Catherine was saying. The leader of the opposition has faced no confidence votes and lost those no confidence votes from his own party and is still in place. They have different leadership rules in the Labour Party, but there's no reason why the Prime Minister can't continue in office even if she wins by one vote. She would be damaged, certainly, but she could stay.
But as MP after MP has told us here today, this does not change the mathematics of what is going on with regards to the main issue, which is the deal.
Yeah, and we're seeing, again, reports, all of this happening on Twitter as well as out here, talking about whether or not she has got some kind of really key legal language about the backstop, because that seems to be the key issue. They want to hear something a bit more robust than they've seen thus far, something that they believe will actually change this. We've had many times Theresa May coming back, talking about what she's got, talking about the deal, and more frustration from her side as to whether or not it really means what they want it to. So it's going to be about what she brings back from Europe as well.
There is still Labour's vote of no confidence hanging over her. Do you think it's crucial that even if she wins this tonight, when she goes to Brussels in the next 2 days, that she gets something concrete that can maybe just stave off that vote of confidence?
That would be important, but I think Labour are actually not very keen to trigger that vote of confidence in the entire government, because that might actually shine the spotlight on their policy and their lack of a policy really about Brexit. So Labour's position is they don't like the backstop because the backstop could be permanent as they see it, but then on the other hand they want a permanent customs union, and of course that is actually quite ironically quite close to what the backstop actually could create. So I think there's the danger for them is if they do push for a vote of confidence, she probably would win it, but also the questions will then be asked about really what is their Brexit policy. Jeremy Corbyn's already under a lot of pressure to go for a second referendum. We saw the Prime Minister in question time in the Commons earlier really shining the spotlight on Corbyn, and actually I thought came out of that at a time which should have been very difficult for her. She actually won the exchange with Corbyn by essentially accusing him of trying to betray Brexit.
OK, Catherine, Henry, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's cross over the road and go to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who is in the lobby for us. And of course, there's a lot of focus on the DUP at the moment, Vicky. We've had a tweet today from Sammy Wilson saying that their confidence and supply deal is with the Conservative Party and not with this leader.
Yeah, I mean, they've been saying that quite a lot, and it's interesting that those Brexiteers in the party, the European Research Group, they are clearly focusing on that, and they are saying, look, this Prime Minister, Theresa May, cannot bring the DUP back into the fold. That is their main argument for triggering this challenge against her, and they say that's the reason they want to change the leader, because they don't think the DUP can be brought back into the fold, which of course then means that she doesn't have a majority to govern. And that is, I think, the fear amongst lots of people, not just those Brexiteers, but how the party ahead of this, assuming that Theresa May does win, how they can carry on, get a deal, and then get through the very difficult legislation that has to pass through the House of Commons over the next 3.5 months. So that is a real concern for lots of MPs, sort of regardless of tonight. Now, I think most do feel that she is going to win this vote. Many see it as a distraction. But it is interesting, I think, that she felt she had to say to those MPs in the room that she will not lead them into the general election in 2022. And I've just been speaking to a minister who said he thinks, and he's a loyal minister, he thinks that MPs will want more clarification about that, about exactly how long she intends to carry on in the post, whether delivering Brexit, as she says she wants to do, means delivering March leaving, or carrying on and being the one who oversees all those very difficult negotiations still to come about the future relationship. Now, she has promised tonight to do it differently, to not just keep all that information close to her, if you like, to get more people to join in and have their say in all of that. But, you know, lots of people just wonder whether she really is listening to that and taking on board the changes they feel she needs to make.
OK, Vicky, for the moment, thank you very much. We'll come back to you later in the hour. These are the live pictures from the Palace of Westminster at the moment, where the secret ballot is taking place. This is as much as we'll get at the moment in terms of an insight into the room. That is Committee Room 14 behind those walls, and that's where they vote. And then next door to it is Committee Room 13, where at 8 o'clock the count will go on, and then we should get Sir Graham Brady to come out, the chair of the 1922 committee, and tell us what the result is, and we expect he will do that in front of the cameras, so we will be allowed into the room for that. Well, there is around 40 minutes, incidentally, left of that vote. Now, we're set to leave the European Union in just over 3 months, of course, on March 29th next year, and time is already pretty tight to secure a deal. But if the Prime Minister loses the vote of no confidence this evening, it could dramatically change the path that we take. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar.
They've been demonstrating here for months, rain or shine, for and against Brexit. Obsessed? Maybe, but they're also right to feel Brexit's the biggest issue facing Britain in decades. Bigger even than tonight's decision to keep on or sack Mrs May, to choose the leader who'll try somehow to break the Brexit deadlock. Theresa May would still be facing a deeply divided House of Commons, party and cabinet, still struggling to win over Brexiteers who fear the Brexit plan could leave Britain trapped by EU rules indefinitely. Some of them sit in cabinet. 2 have walked out since this was filmed. More of them are potential leadership candidates. And today, one Brexiteer warned a no-deal Brexit was still possible, and Mrs May, or presumably another leader, had to get more concessions out of Brussels or else.
It's very difficult to support the deal if we don't get changes to the backstop. I don't think it will get through. I'm not even sure that the Cabinet will agree for it to be put to the House of Commons.
Among the Cabinet's former Remainers, some would support a softer Brexit, with closer EU links than Mrs May's, though they're not saying that. They are saying they'd fight against leaving without a deal, and the Commons wouldn't wear it. You've been clear in your view that a no-deal Brexit is not a runner.
I've been clear that the House of Commons will stop no deal. The fact that I think it'll stop no deal doesn't mean we shouldn't continue preparations just in case. Some people have pointed out it could nevertheless happen. But I think no deal would be such a bad outcome for the country that I believe the House of Commons will assert itself and stop it.
So far, though, there's no sign of European leaders giving Britain the kind of concessions that might win round the Commons. No sign of agreeing at tomorrow's EU summit. The UK could leave EU rules in its own time on its own terms. In Berlin today, the German leader spoke plainly.
We have no
intention of changing the exit agreement, Angela Merkel said. That's the general position of all 27 member states, and so it's unlikely we will leave these debates with any kind of changes. Today, Mrs May warned any leader would be short of time. The Brexit timetable is tight after tomorrow's summit. In the new year, before January 21st, the delayed meaningful vote in the Commons is due. If the government's defeated, it must report back on its plans for the next steps within 21 days. But any deal must also be approved by the European Parliament before it takes effect. Then, at 11 p.m. on March the 29th, the UK is due to leave the EU. That's if Brexit isn't delayed, as the Prime Minister warned it might be, or the deadlock continues and other outcomes like a softer Brexit or a referendum come into play. Who holds the keys to number 10 is always hugely significant. But whether Mrs May survives or not, however long her time in Downing Street turns out to be, the biggest question of all, what's Britain's future, still hangs in the air. John Pienaar, BBC News, Downing Street.
Well, were Theresa May to lose here this evening, then of course a leadership battle would start in earnest, and there would be hustings here across the road over the course of the next week. Conservative Party would whittle those who wanted to be the next leader down to 2, and then those 2 would be put to the Conservative membership, the grassroots. So let's check in with the grassroots and speak to Patrick Duffy. He's the chair of the South West Wiltshire Conservative Association, and he joins us now on Skype. Patrick, it's very good to have you with us. Well, tell us straight away, do you want Theresa May to hang on or not?
I think as a personal view, I feel a change would be good, but the membership in general is very afraid of that happening. They take a huge personal responsibility for what's going on in terms of their role in it, and take it very seriously. And I think the last thing they want to do is unsettle everything at the moment, and that seems to be the prevailing view of the membership, although maybe not mine personally.
There is a feeling that the Conservative members, of course, are more Brexit than Remain, and yet you will know that the Parliamentary Conservative Party is more Remain than Brexit. Does that frustrate the members?
It's a huge anomaly. Yes, I mean, my own association is a firm Leave voting association and constituency, and when we see what appears to be a very dominant Remain view in Parliament, it is very frustrating because both major parties are there on a manifesto commitment to deliver Brexit, not to stall it, not to debate it, not to slow it down, but to deliver on it. And that's not what we're seeing happening at the moment.
It's very likely if there was a leadership contest that there would have to be, you would presume, a Brexit candidate. Who would you want that Brexit candidate to be?
I think you're quite right. It needs to be a Brexit candidate if we get to that point, which I reiterate now I think probably looks unlikely. But it certainly needs to be a Brexit candidate and someone who, in my view, personal view, is able to undertake the forceful last stage of the negotiation that we need to be doing.
Yeah, and just very, very quickly, the deal. Do you like the deal that she's brought back?
No, I think the potential for it keeping us in the EU beyond the 2-year on the backstop makes the deal and the negotiating position it creates untenable. And I think that is the failing in it. And I think the sooner we vote on it and get that off the table, the better.
Patrick Duffy, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Good to get an impression from the Conservative grassroots. Well, to give you some more insight as to how Mrs May's colleagues have been voting, here is a tweet this evening from Margot James, a Conservative MP and Minister. She says, "Proud to have voted in support of the Prime Minister. Thank you to the many people who have contacted my office today to urge me to do just that." So that seems to be one in the Theresa May column. There are others. We've seen one from George Freeman today, who said it was very moving and a warm reception for in the 1922 committee today. But there was that guarantee, of course, that she is not going to stand at the 2022 election, that really at the urging of many of her colleagues. So she would deliver, as he says, an orderly Brexit. She'll step aside for the election to lead the reunification and renewal that we need. And George Freeman has been one of the loyalists in the party over recent months, but frustrations at the gridlock that there is in the House of Commons at the moment over the deal. So it'll be interesting to get the thoughts of George Freeman and the others after the vote this evening. That will come, of course, at around 9 o'clock this evening. We think we will get the result. The ballot will be open for just over 30 minutes. Committee room 14, that's where it is happening there. The count will be next door in committee room 13, and we are hearing that around 2/3 of the Conservative MPs have already voted. The votes will be counted, and then Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, that is the group of backbench Conservative MPs, he will come out and inform us what the result is and what the margin of victory is. We are expecting a victory for Theresa May, but of course what people have been telling us all through the day publicly, not necessarily what they might do in private in a secret ballot. Plenty more to come. Stay with us.
Good evening. It's been a quiet week of weather so far, but with some clearer skies, it's brought a chilly feel. It's also brought some lovely sunset pictures, as you can see from this one sent in by Anne in East Yorkshire. Now, under those clearer skies, though, it will turn quite cold. The British Isles over the last couple of days really is the battleground between that high pressure into Scandinavia and frontal systems trying to push in from the Atlantic, but they're not making much impression. They will gradually bring a little more in the way of cloud and a few isolated dribs and drabs of rain into the far west, but elsewhere it is going to be a coolish night with low single figures, and so a touch of frost not out of the question in sheltered rural parts. But That's going to be the story for the next couple of days. That weather front trying to push in, but the high pressure really keeping it at bay, and plenty of isobars on the charts, which means that the wind direction is coming from a southeasterly, a cold source at this time of year. And with a noticeable breeze around on Thursday, it will also feel noticeably cooler out there. A lot of dry weather in the story, and even some breaks in the cloud continuing with some sunny spells. But you've got to factor in the winds now, not just the winds, the direction and the speed. And so on your thermometer, well, it may well say 4, 5, 6 degrees, but if you factor in that wind direction, it is going to feel noticeably cooler out. Probably the coldest day of the week. All the time out to the west, we'll see cloud and a few showery bits and pieces of rain trying to squeeze in, but not making that much of an impression. Now, as we move out of Thursday, the winds will fall a little lighter, and with clearer skies, those temperatures are going to fall away, with the exception perhaps the Western Isles, Northern Ireland and the far southwest. Here, temperatures will hold up above freezing, but we could see a chilly start to the day on Friday, the coolest start, with a frost first thing in the morning, but largely dry. There's that frontal system trying to push in from the west. Now, with that cold air sitting across us, it could cause some issues late on Friday into Saturday. Eventually, that front looks likely to win the battle, and you can see for a time as it moves across that colder air, we could see some snow. Now, this is chiefly going to fall to higher ground across much of Scotland, northern England and North Wales, but there is the possibility of some of it falling at lower levels, so you certainly need to keep abreast of the forecast as we head into the weekend.
A 100 years after independence, Poland is grappling with an identity crisis. I meet nationalists, progressives, and the country's newest arrivals. Our World, the struggle for Poland's future. Saturday and Sunday, 9:30 p.m. on the BBC News channel.
When the weather can't decide what to do, you still can. To know what's coming, check the BBC Weather app.
There are many movies out at the moment that are claiming to be comedies. This beats all of them. And on the one hand, it's a political tale. On the other hand, it is a magic, realist fable. It is baggy and overlong. You can either just see it as a really good popcorn adventure or as something much deeper. That's what a proper cult movie looks like. My problem with it is I wanted it to be darker. The script is laughable, but not in a good way. This has proved so divisive. I was reminded of the friendship between Elliot and E.T. Every time anyone says mockumentary, immediately you think, is it as good as Spinal Tap? The answer is no. Very smartly reinvented a franchise, and who thought that was possible? It does the thing that cinema is meant to do at its very best, to completely immerse you, to transport you, to take you to another world.
Words of Wisdom, the film review, Friday at 5:45 on the BBC News channel.
Okay, all right, okay. Very good evening. Welcome back to Westminster. It is just 7:30. There is half an hour left in the ballot. 317 Conservative MPs voting this evening, being asked the question whether they still have confidence in the British Prime Minister Theresa May. We should know the results shortly after 8 p.m. This evening. The Prime Minister, just to remind you, needs 159 votes to survive. If she secures that, then she is safe, of course, for another year. But if she loses, then it will trigger a leadership contest during which Mrs May will remain in power for the short time until they, of course, have picked two candidates and a future leader of the party. Cameras not allowed into the room tonight, but we do know it's in committee room 14. We're expecting Sir Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, to come out around 9 o'clock, we think, tonight to give us the results. And then, of course, we will be able to talk about the margin or not of the victory that Theresa May has. Let's speak to two people who have been watching events today. Sam Coates from The Times and Jack Blanchard from Politico. I mean, this is all Christmas is coming at once for political people like you, isn't it? for avid watchers of Westminster. What do you think is going on in there at the moment?
Well, I think we've got the last 20 minutes of voting. I believe about 80% of Conservative MPs are thought to have voted. Some might have done it by proxy, so there might be some votes in there that we haven't been able to tell. We've had a fascinating public tally through the day because Tory MPs, since the starting gun on this leadership on this vote of no confidence was started just after 7:30 this morning. There's been a public tally. Somewhere in the region of 170 MPs have come out and said, we back Theresa May. Around just underneath 40 have come out and said, we don't. We have no vote of no confidence. Now, so that makes it look as if Theresa May is almost certain to be home and dry. But the question is, do we trust them? Now, I had a member of the government this morning say to me that five ministers, including one in the cabinet, they claimed, were going to say publicly that they backed her, and then privately, once they got into the privacy of Committee Room 14, vote against her. So of course we cannot be sure, but those numbers look pretty overwhelming, and so it does look as if we're heading to a victory for Theresa May. It could still be 100 to 115 colleagues voting against her, which is significant and will weaken her, but a win's a win, and she is the Japanese knot-weeded Prime Minister. If she wins by one, she is going to cling on.
It's a bit like, I'm trying to think of what it must be like for those who wanted to vote against her, because if they're in a cabinet position or if they're a minister, Jack, they of course have to come out and say that they're supporting her. But at the same time, they'll be lobbied by Brexiteers and those who might be future leaders, and they have to talk to them and keep them sweet as well.
Well, that's right. And of course, you know, they'll come out on TV here and tell you how much respect they've got for the Prime Minister and how they wanted to continue. But in the privacy of a voting booth, they might very well turn around and stick the knife in. But it's what's really interesting.
Shy Conservative voters again.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
But Sam and I have been standing outside the committee room earlier, and it's, you know, it's an absolute torrent of MPs tottering around and journalists there all chatting to each other. Nobody seems to be talking about realistically that Theresa May is going to lose. What's really interesting is they're all talking about the margin by which she will win. And so although it's very dangerous to make predictions, especially when we'll find out in the next hour or so what's going to happen, that isn't a conversation that's happening in there at the moment.
So does the margin, Sam, does that matter? I mean, because she said that she'll carry on if she wins just by one vote, but can she really?
So the margin matters a bit, probably not as much as simply the fact that she will carry on and continue. There are, if a large number of people come out against her, parliamentary opportunities to maybe try and do her in again, not this one. But I think today's significance lies in two or three other things. I think the fact that she wins the vote is important, but the most important thing is that this was a vote of no confidence under the Tory rules. The Tory rules also say that if you have one of those, you can't do it again for another year. The gun was fired, it turned out to have a blank. The gun is therefore taken away from the Brexiteers. That will have an immediate impact on the cabinet discussion about what happens next on Brexit. It means that Theresa May perhaps doesn't need to look over her right shoulder the entire time at Brexiteers who might punish her or come after her if she ploughs towards perhaps a softer Brexit. I think some cabinet ministers see this as an opportunity to try and shift her to the kind of place that might see her reaching out across the political aisle. She's also pre-announced her resignation. She says that she's not going to fight the next election, which she claims is in 2022. Frankly, who knows, but that's what she says tonight. That again will weaken her authority. It's perhaps not that much of a surprise, but it will mean that those people who want to run for the leadership have more opportunity, more certainty that opportunity might come maybe as early as April, May, June next year when we come out of the European Union, but waiting to do part two of the trade negotiation. So I think there are other significances greater than simply the margin of the victory. I mean, by all means, it's certainly true Theresa May isn't out of the woods, even if she wins convincingly tonight, because she's got to get through a deal or face humiliation again, potentially in the new year. But I just wonder whether the dynamics aren't changed slightly by the fact that that great big threat that we've talked about for 2.5 years is taken off the table.
But what's not taken off the table and what's still there is she still faces the same problem tomorrow morning, which is she cannot get anything through Parliament. And you know, and this vote today isn't going to do anything to affect that. And Sam's absolutely right that the Brexiteers will no longer have this thing hanging over that they could try and force her out of power. But what they'll still very much have hanging over is that they can block anything that she tries to do between now, well, over the next 12 months.
And a word on the ERG, they've pulled the trigger. If they fired a blank here, where do they go?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I've been chatting to some of them in there. They are very much talking about the margin of victory or defeat. For them, you know, if she loses by this many votes, then she's done for. How could she carry on? That's the sort of thing that you hear. I agree with Sam. I think if she wins by one vote, she very much will.
Because this is not 1990, is it? This is not normal government business. And the country's in a moment of crisis.
She can make a convincing case that now is not the time to walk away. The last guy did that, if you remember, and she's very much not the sort of person that would do do that. And so, yeah, you're right, and it leaves the ERG in a difficult spot. You know, we had that last month they made a big song and dance about having a vote. It didn't happen. This time it does happen. If they don't get anything close to the numbers that they've been claiming privately they can get, it makes them look a lot weaker than what they would have told us in the past.
Yeah, all the focus, of course, on the Conservatives tonight, not much on Labour, but of course if she gets through this, then the other side of it, she could be facing a vote of no confidence. But so far, Jeremy Corbyn appears to have resisted the pressure that he's had from not only his own side, but the other opposition parties as well.
Absolutely. The question is there a majority in the House of Commons to go after her personally and her government? I think that Labour were very intrigued by the wording of Owen Paterson's article this morning saying that he had no confidence in her. It said this: I have no confidence in Theresa May either as Tory leader or Prime Minister. Now, if he's gone on the record with that, and Labour put down a motion saying we too have no confidence in the Prime Minister, does Owen Paterson feel compelled to vote for that? Are there other people who feel compelled to vote a vote of no confidence, repeating simply what they've done and said publicly that they were going to do today? I think it suddenly starts to put a number of Tory MPs in an interesting position where they could end up in a parliamentary vote through the division lobbies, voting against their government as well, with potentially quite significant impact. That's why this isn't over. That's why there are more avenues for people who are sceptical about Theresa May in the Conservative Party to pursue. But I certainly think the optics of coming back after her, if they've done really badly, just becomes a lot worse.
And your colleagues at Politico in Brussels, what are they saying about what's happening over there? We're on the eve of a summit, they're watching this, they're not commenting on it, of course, but if she wins, does it strengthen her hand to try and get something out of them?
Well, what she's hoping is that they will see the chaos here, which, by the way, everyone in Europe is watching open-mouthed, cannot believe their eyes at this once stable country and the way it's acting yet again. But nonetheless, assuming that she wins tonight...
They have got a no-confidence vote in France next week, I understand, as well.
And
So we're not on our own.
Teetering on the brink as well. But anyway, the expectation is that if she does win tonight, she will, of course, go to Brussels tomorrow for a European Council summit. The hope inside number 10 is that they will see this again and they will see how much pressure she is under, and that will help to bring them back to the table. They will say, OK, we all have to work together to help you solve this problem. I mean, I have to say, so far that has not been the message from European capitals. They've been saying, this is a British problem, this is a Conservative Party problem, why should we change our Brexit negotiating position just to help you with an internal problem? But in the end, everyone needs to make this work, and so number 10 are hoping they can use this to apply some pressure in Brussels
They're
tomorrow.
making the point, aren't they, that this is a deal with the UK government, it's not a deal with Theresa May. Jack Blanchard, Sam Coates, lovely to see you both. Thank you so much indeed. Well, a little earlier, just after he'd voted, I spoke to Matt Hancock, the Secretary for Health and Social Affairs and Social Care, and he told me about the moment that the Prime Minister had told the 1922 committee that she would not carry on after she had delivered Brexit safely. Have a listen.
She talked about how, especially after last year, she really she wanted to, but she recognised that that wasn't going to happen. She was absolutely crystal clear.
Is that her cabinet colleagues, the likes of you, who've been telling her that's just not possible?
Well, I certainly haven't made that case.
Well, who has?
I don't know, but that was what she said, and then she went through the very strong case for why she is the right person now to continue and complete these negotiations on Brexit, which she's in the middle of. You know, she was supposed to be in Ireland this afternoon, and there was a real warmth in the room. There were some questions, a whole series of questions, but a real warmth towards her. And I very much hope that colleagues like me are backing her in numbers.
Well, to give you some more insight into what Conservative MPs are saying this evening, and Mrs May's colleagues who have been voting, here is a tweet from Margot James. She's a Conservative MP and Minister, and this is what she wrote. Proud to have voted in support of the Prime Minister. Thank you to the many people who have contacted my office today to urge me to do just that. And she also includes a picture of her ballot paper to prove it, which is the first ballot paper I've seen today, so interesting. Not everyone, of course, is backing the Prime Minister. We've had a number of people come out today and say quite publicly that they will be voting against her, and our chief political correspondent Vicky Young spoke a little earlier to Sir Bernard Jenkin, who today announced that he had put in a letter, a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister. Here he is.
Well, I'm afraid it didn't change my mind. I am clear that I'm not supporting Theresa this evening, and it's not for any lack of admiration of her and undervaluing her commitment. But the situation we face is that the Conservative government has rather lost its authority to command the confidence of the House of Commons. And it's difficult to know how the government's going to carry on its business without completely refreshing its relationship with the DUP, because we haven't got an overall majority at the moment. We rely on the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party from Northern Ireland, to support the Conservative government, but they're very angry with Theresa May because of the deal that she brought back from the European Union, which they regard as a very deep betrayal of promises they made to them about the status of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom as we leave the European Union. And there is no sign that that breach can be repaired. She's gone back to Brussels to see what reassurances can be given, but there's no prospect of any substantial change in that draft agreement. And it's been confirmed by the European Union Council of Ministers office that they have again reissued a statement saying that they are not prepared to renegotiate. The only way to break this deadlock, I mean, the problem with
a new leader, what does a new leader give you, given the parliamentary arithmetic stays the same?
Well, that's perfectly true, but the one bit of the arithmetic that would change is the new leader would have to say, we're not having this agreement. And whatever happens, the agreement with these arrangements in it that so offend the status of Northern Ireland, and indeed David Trimble, who was one of the architects of the peace process in Northern Ireland and won the Peace Prize, he says these arrangements are a challenge themselves to the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement that ended the violence in Northern Ireland. This can't go forward in its present form. It has to be changed, and we have to be prepared to leave the EU without a withdrawal agreement.
Sir Bernard Jenkin talking to Vicky Young a little earlier. He is one of those who will be voting against the Prime Minister this evening. Of course, if the Prime Minister were to lose, and all the indications are that she will win tonight, but if she were to lose, then of course the Conservative Party members would have a role in what happens next, because two Conservative candidates for the leadership would be put forward to the Conservative members, and they would vote on which one they want. So let's go live to Sale in Greater Manchester, where Rita Chakrabarti is there, and you're talking, Rita, to a number of the grassroots members about what they would want next.
Yes, absolutely. I'm here at the Conservative Club in Sale, where tonight's events are, of course, the only topic of conversation. But there is a great range of opinions here as to what should happen and what the outcome should be. Let's speak to some people. Stephen Carlton-Woods, you're a Conservative member, lifelong Conservative voter, a Brexiter. What do you want to happen tonight?
Well, I'm a bit apprehensive about tonight, but whatever happens tonight, I think the party needs to come together and deliver what we're meant to do on Brexit, what the people voted for. But I'm really unsure at this stage which way it's going to go. But I would expect probably that Theresa will stay in power.
Is that what you would wish to happen?
I just want the right thing to happen for the party and make sure that we all unite and get together. So whichever way it goes, that's what needs to be the outcome.
Okay. Robin Garrido, you are a councillor in Salford. You're a Remainer. What do you want to happen tonight?
Well, first of all, I want a resounding vote in favour of Theresa May. It's disgusting that we had to go through this situation, and I think certainly the 47-plus Conservative MPs who called for it ought to hold their heads in shame. I think it's a disgraceful situation for the party to have to go through at a time when it's so important to our country that we get a decision over Brexit right. We had a deal in front of us. If we could have had the support of the majority, if not all, of the Conservative members of Parliament, I feel that would have been for the best deal for the country. As it is now, we're in a leadership situation. I hope and I think we will win it, but we could well have done without it.
Michelle McGrath, you're a candidate here in Sale. Do you worry in the way that Robin Garrido does about the impression this is giving the country about the Conservative Party and its ability to sort things out?
No, I don't worry about that, because at the end of the day, it does reflect the country in general. It's a 48-52 split across the country, and I think what we're seeing is a reflection of that within our party. That said, I don't think this should have happened today. I think at such a crucial time we should all be getting behind Theresa. I am a Brexiteer. The deal almost does it. if we can sort out the backstop, if we can get some clarity around the backstop.
The Northern Ireland issue.
The Northern Ireland issue, absolutely. That's my sticking point. That's where I've come unstuck. But at the end of the day, she's our Prime Minister. We should all be behind her, absolutely. And I hope she wins tonight.
If she wins by a small majority, and the indications are at the moment that she will win, but if she wins by a small majority, is her authority going to be severely dented?
No, I think we've got to get over that and just carry on, get behind the Prime Minister and deliver on Brexit.
No, a win is a win. A win is a win, isn't it? If I win by one vote next May, I've won. So we all get behind her on that result.
Totally agree. One vote will be enough, but the more over that 159, I think it is, that we get, the better off we'll be. But definitely one vote's enough.
Stephen, of the three of you, you are the person who is most lukewarm, I would say, about Theresa May leading the party going forward over the Brexit negotiations. What would she need to do to convince you that she is the right person?
Well, it's not really my view about her being the right person. She's the Prime Minister. The way we are at the moment, she is the Prime Minister. She's leading our party. Maybe she's not done things in the way that some of us would have liked her to have done things. She could have been a bit tougher, go with like a no-deal angle with Europe, might have given her a bit more leverage on negotiations. I think there's been a few issues with that, but tonight, like I say, if she wins, I'll be fully supporting her, because that's the end. That's a chapter closed. We've had all this speculation for a couple of months, you know, about are these letters going in? Graham Brady's been driven mad with people asking him how many letters has he got. So now it's come to a head. We've got this vote tonight. It's going on right now. And whatever the outcome of that is, we'll all respect that, and we'll be behind the party whichever direction it goes.
I'll just say that I think over the past week in particular, Theresa May has shown what she's made of. When she spoke in Parliament, when she put the statement through early last week, and when she's responded, even today, in the situation that she was in today, when she responded to questions in the Commons, I think she has proved what she's made of. And if you actually speak to people on the street, as I do, and I know other people here have been out delivering leaflets and canvassing and so on, right, their view is very much that she's a resilient Prime Minister, right, and we should get behind her.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all very much, Michelle, Robin and Stephen. So lots of strong opinions there. We'll wait to see what the result of the ballot is, and then we'll be back to check the reaction. In the meantime, back to you, Christian.
Rita, thank you very much indeed. A win's a win, say the members in Sale. Not the message that we heard from South West Wiltshire and the chair there earlier in the programme, who was very much of the opinion that Theresa May should go and that he didn't like her deal at all. So maybe the membership as divided as the party is across the row. Well, one man who knows all about leadership contests is the former Deputy Prime Minister, Lord Michael Heseltine, and earlier he spoke to our colleague Hugh Edwards.
Well, I think she's in very serious trouble, not over this particular leadership challenge. I think my whole instinct is she will win that. By how much, I don't know, but she will win it. But that's not the issue. The issue is whether she has the authority of Prime Minister to say, I command a majority in the Commons. And she ran away from that when it was obvious she didn't. But the facts remain.
That's not changed?
Nothing has changed. The deal is there. It is the only deal. And it's not going through the Commons.
Do you think there's any prospect that the Prime Minister can turn some colleagues and get them on board in sufficient numbers?
Well, how? If you look at the numbers, the crude numbers, you look at the number of people who have resigned. Are they going to vote for her? They've risked their careers and all of that. Are the Brexiteers, are they going to resign? If these guys who've provoked the challenge now today, are they going to vote for her? It doesn't add up.
Which leaves us where?
Well, what it leaves us, the frightening thing, it leaves us with the Christmas recess, when this place, which is the only place that can take decisions, is off for turkey and the mince pies. And I hope that members of Parliament won't put up with that they will simply say we're not just going off to relax and enjoy ourselves, when this enormous and very dangerous cloud is hanging over the future of the British economy and the British people.
Well, Michael Heseltine speaking to Hugh Edwards a little earlier, making the point that whatever the result here tonight, it does not change the maths across the road when it comes to the crucial issue, which is, of course, getting the Brexit deal through the House of Commons. Let's speak to our chief political correspondent, Vicky Young, who is in the lobby for us. So what time is it? It's 8 minutes to 8. 8 minutes left of voting, Vicky.
Yeah, and I can exclusively reveal that the Chancellor has voted, and when asked how he was voting, he said Conservative. And then Theresa May did go in to vote, and one of my colleagues asked her, and she simply laughed. But it's always hard to predict these things. Now, I saw someone from the Downing Street team earlier who seemed quite apprehensive, actually. I was surprised how nervous they seemed, but that could just be the nature of this kind of thing. It's always obviously a bit destabilising when the party decides that it might want to try and change the leader. But there are still many predicting that Theresa May will win pretty clearly. Now, as you were saying there, what that means for the longer term is still pretty uncertain. I think it was very interesting that she felt she had to say to MPs that even though in her heart she'd wanted to lead the party into the general election in 2022, she recognised that that's not what everyone wanted, and so she said she wouldn't do that. I spoke to a minister just now who said he thought that colleagues would want more clarification about that, actually, about whether she meant, as some interpreted it, as she will go in April, and as others have interpreted it, saying she'll go through to 2021. So that is clearly an issue. And then, of course, that much broader issue about how, at the end of all this, she still is able to get a deal through Parliament on Brexit. It doesn't seem she gave many answers there. She said she'd been around Europe, of course, asking for clarification. There seems to be that she feels she's got something. Whether it's going to be enough to bring the DUP back on board is another matter. That certainly the Eurosceptics don't think that it will be enough. So we'll have to see whether tonight, if she wins and wins well, whether that can in any way give a bit more stability to her leadership.
It was interesting that loyalists like George Freeman, who tweeted earlier today, Vicky, was saying she can't go on, and she certainly can't go on to the 22 election. That was clearly a demand that was made by people who were going to vote for her this evening. But as we've seen in previous times, when leaders say they're going, the speculation builds as to when, and the power just starts to ebb away.
Yeah, and I think that's very much the case. It's happened every time, hasn't it, that has happened. Tony Blair did it, David Cameron did it, and it does become a problem, because the idea that she can take them through Brexit, meaning that she will be the one in charge of negotiations about the future relationship. Now remember, the withdrawal agreement, as you know, is only part of this. All the difficult decisions about that longer term relationship are still to come. It sounds tonight as if she said to them, look, she's going to do it differently, that she is going to be more open about what she's aiming for, that she will get more people included in all of that. But I'm just not sure they're going to give her the time to go into all of that in the longer term. And, one Tory MP tonight saying that, he was finding it pretty galling that there were cabinet ministers going around on air saying they're backing her completely, and yet behind the scenes were asking him for his support in a leadership bid if and when it comes. So clearly, I don't think this tonight is going to resolve those issues.
OK, Vicky Young in the lobby. Sit tight for us. Just a few minutes left of voting. We start to get people drifting out and telling us what they think has happened. And don't forget, this evening there is a special programme here on the BBC with Andrew Neil. We'll get all the reaction to the vote as it comes in. We've also been getting reaction today from the grassroots and from Brexit voting communities around the country, and finding out what they think about the chaos across the road here in Westminster. Our correspondent Sarah Campbell is in the Prime Minister's constituency this evening in Maidenhead. Sarah.
Yes, indeed. It's exciting times here at the bowling club here, Christian. They beat Southall earlier on this evening, and currently it's internal competition, so a little bit of infighting at the Desborough Bowling Club. Perhaps some parallels with Parliament this evening and what's going on in the echoes, the corridors of Westminster. Of course, this is a personal constituency for Theresa May. She's been MP here since 1997, so lots of people here know her, have worked with her, have seen her regularly. We've got two of them here. Roger Wyatt, you are the manager here at the bowling club. Good evening to you. And also Nahid Majid, who will talk to you in a minute. Roger, I'd like to talk to you first of all. What do you think about what's going on? First of all, you are a Remain supporter, so are you a Theresa May supporter?
Very much so, yeah. Theresa May is our local MP and she's always supported the Bowls Club in everything we've done. Even to the extent she came a couple of years ago to our 50th anniversary, and it was great to see, and spontaneous applause. So I think the club generally support her.
And you're a Conservative voter. What do you make to what's happening this evening and the vote of confidence in her?
I find it all very confusing. I mean, how anybody can... She appoints a team and the team let her down as soon as they just go on and on. It seems like total self-interest. And I feel very sorry for her because she works extremely hard, very dedicated, and might not get everything right, but there are ways of doing things, and I don't think a vote of no confidence is the way to go forward.
So you still think she should be Prime Minister?
I think so. I think she should finish the job she started. And all the civil servants who have prepared this deal now will still be there if she's not leader tomorrow. So, I just wonder what people are trying to achieve at the moment. Yeah.
Now, Naheed, I'd like to bring you in. You are a former mayoress of Maidenhead. Again, somebody who's campaigned personally for Theresa May. What do you make to what's going on this evening?
I think it's quite appalling behaviour of the Conservative MPs that have called for the vote of no confidence tonight. This is not the right time. It's a very crucial part of the Brexit process. We should be backing the Prime Minister. The MPs should be backing the Prime Minister. This doesn't benefit anyone apart from a few MPs with personal ambitions.
What do you think is going to happen tonight?
I'm quite confident she will win, and I'm quite confident she's quite tenacious. She'll persevere and carry on with the Brexit process. It's just a shame that the Conservative Party are going down this route of self-destructing by calling for this vote tonight.
You know her character. What kind of person is she? Where do you think she goes from here if she does win the vote?
She's very strong-minded. She's very hard-working, dedicated MP and PM as well. And I think she will just carry on doing the job that we elected her to do and deliver the Brexit and carry on with other important issues nationally that we tend to ignore at the moment and override with the Brexit issue.
OK, now, Roger, just back to you. You're not a politician. You're not a massively political person. As sort of the voice of the people, what do you think people make of what's going on? Certainly, what do they make here in Maidenhead?
I was a Remainer, basically, because during my career I've spent all my time working in Europe and across the world, and I'm used to no boundaries. But I'm old enough to remember when you had to go through checkpoints and customs, and it really is, to my mind, a retrograde step to get out of it. But having said that, nobody knew what we were voting for. I mean, it's just such a simple question, and now people are making mileage out of the fact, well, we need this, we need that. And I think it's all hindsight, and the criticism, much of it is wrong and unnecessary. I agree.
And for Theresa May personally?
She's a lovely lady, that's all I can say. She's always been very dedicated. One minute she might be in Moscow, next minute she's in a charity shop in the high street. So what more can you ask? She goes to all the events, and she's supported people locally for a great many years, and I'm sure they will continue to support her, whatever happens tonight. Yeah.
Roger, thank you very much indeed. Well, I know in between the bowling this evening, and Naheed, thank you very much indeed as well. In between the bowling, they will be keeping an eye on the vote, which we are expecting imminently.
I do love a bit of bowling. Sarah Campbell, thank you very much indeed. Let's show you the live picture then of Committee Room 14 just across the road where the voting is about to finish. We've had 2 hours of voting. 317 Conservative MPs have been into that room tonight to cast a secret ballot on the leadership of Theresa May. We will get a result, we think, in the course of the next hour. There is a room next to Committee Room 14 where several Conservative officials will be counting those ballots and finding out what the final tally is. And of course we will be looking not only at the result but the margin of the result and whether Theresa May has been returned as the Conservative leader. Stay with us, plenty more to come from here in Westminster. This is BBC News. I'm Christain Fraser, live at Westminster, where voting has closed in the ballot on Theresa May's future. Conservative MPs have spent 2 hours deciding whether she should stay or go. The results are expected in the next hour. Earlier, the Prime Minister addressed what was described as an emotional meeting, promising not to lead the party into the next general election.
There was a real warmth in the room. There were some questions, a whole series of questions, but a real warmth towards her. And I very much hope that colleagues like me are backing her in numbers.
Well, I'm afraid it didn't change my mind. I'm clear that I'm not supporting Theresa this evening.
This morning, as news broke of the leadership challenge, the Prime Minister spoke to the nation and vowed to fight on and deliver Brexit.
Delivering the Brexit people voted for. Building a country that works for everyone. I have devoted myself unsparingly to these tasks ever since I became Prime Minister, and I stand ready to finish the job.
A very good evening. Welcome back to Westminster. It is 8 o'clock here, and the ballot, which will seal the fate of Theresa May, has just closed after a tumultuous day in British politics. For the last 2 hours, Conservative MPs have been voting on whether they still have confidence in this Prime Minister. Let's show you the live shot of Committee Room 14, where the vote has been ongoing. As I say, they will be counting the ballot next door to that room. A number of Conservative officials will go through those secret ballots. Remember, it was a secret ballot, so whatever you've heard from politicians today about the support they have for Theresa May, what they say in public and what they say in private, not necessarily one and the same thing. 317 Conservative MPs then were eligible to vote in this ballot. The Prime Minister needs, just to remind you, at least 159 votes to survive. If she secures that, then she's safe from another leadership challenge for another year. But of course, if she loses, then a leadership contest will be triggered immediately, and she cannot be part of that. Tory MPs would choose 2 candidates, and party members out in the country would vote on them in a postal ballot. Well, to give you some more insight as to how Mrs May's colleagues have been voting, I'm just looking at a tweet from Margot James, a Conservative MP and Minister, which actually shows us the ballot paper that she was giving tonight. She says she's proud to have voted in support of the Prime Minister. Thank you to the many people who've contacted my office today, she says, to urge me to do just that. And she includes a picture there, as I say, of the way that she has voted. Well, Vicky Young is in Central Lobby 4 us this evening. You'll be talking to one or two of those MPs as they went in to vote. Vicky, what is the mood? What are they thinking has happened?
Well, it's just one of those things, Christian, as you say, it's impossible to predict because if I tell you that I've had a range of Theresa May winning by just 20 to Theresa May winning by 100. So I think it's fair to say that no one really knows. I did see someone from the Downing Street team earlier. They seemed a little bit nervous, and I think there's nervousness amongst MPs about the longer term that, you know, even if she gets through this tonight, if there are dozens and dozens of her own side willing to vote against her in this scenario, how on earth are they going to get a Brexit deal through, not just in the meaningful vote, but how do they get through all that legislation? There is piles of legislation that needs to get through, and they're very concerned about that. And it's clear from the Eurosceptics too that they feel a major problem with Theresa May's premiership is the fact that the DUP, of course, the party that are supporting the Conservatives, keeping them in power really, that they are not happy with her, that they have lost trust in her. And they say that is why this bid to oust her has happened. But there are others who say, look, if she can win and keep those against her down to about 60 or 70, then it does give her some time. It gives her some space to try and get her deal through. And of course, it does mean she can't be challenged in this way for a year. So that is why there are some on the Brexit side who feel that this was completely the wrong timing, that actually securing her position is not what they want to do at this stage.
Vicky, let's just show our viewers pictures of Theresa May, who, of course, went to vote, as she has the right to do, and she's just arrived back in Downing Street this evening, where she will be waiting for the result. We're told that Sir Graham Brady will give us that result around 9 o'clock, but I presume before he comes out and speaks to the cameras, he's going to communicate to the Prime Minister which way it has gone. And it was interesting, I was talking to some people today, Vicky, that the cabinet meeting had been cancelled, and it turned pretty much into a telethon today with supporters of Theresa May ringing round MPs, urging them to support her in this vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're taking nothing for granted. Now, I think we had every single member of the cabinet tweeting very quickly this morning that they were supporting her. But again, you know, I've had Tory MPs here saying you can't believe a word that anyone says, which is, some would say, pretty shocking, which would maybe also explain some of the nervousness that there is around. That people might be saying one thing in public and doing another thing because, of course, it is a secret ballot. I do think it's pretty striking that Theresa May felt when she addressed those backbenchers earlier that she had to say to them she does not intend to go into the 2022 election as their leader, an acknowledgement by her that there are many of her colleagues who simply don't want her to go on that long. What is interesting is how people are interpreting that. I had one loyal minister saying to me, oh, well, that just means she'll stand down a year before the election. She will be the one who takes them into these negotiations that will go on about the future relationship after we leave the EU. Another saying, oh no, she'll have to be gone by April. So I think she's left some room for interpretation there, and maybe people reading into it what they really want to hear. But another MP probably more tellingly said the big question we don't know, regardless of tonight, is whether the Conservative Party is indeed is it capable of being led at all.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Vicky, stay there. We're going to come back to you shortly. Earlier, I spoke to Matt Hancock, who, of course, is the Health Secretary. He'd voted quite early in the evening, and he told me about the moment that the Prime Minister had told the meeting of the 1922 committee that she won't lead the party into the next general election.
She talked about how, especially after last year, she wanted to, but she recognised that wasn't going to happen. She was absolutely crystal clear.
Is that her cabinet colleagues, the likes of you, who've been telling her that's just not possible?
Well, I certainly haven't made that case.
Well, who has?
I don't know, but that was what she said, and then she went through the very strong case for why she is the right person now to continue and complete these negotiations on Brexit, which she's in the middle of. You know, she was supposed to be in Ireland this afternoon, and there was a real warmth in the room. There were some questions, a whole series of questions, but a real warmth towards her. And I very much hope that colleagues like me are backing her in numbers.
Health Secretary Matt Hancock there. He is one in the May column, but of course there are others. 48, of course, at least 48 have put forward a letter of no confidence to Sir Graham Brady, and one of those who went public today was Sir Bernard Jenkin. He said he hadn't changed his mind, having listened to the Prime Minister. He was speaking earlier to Vicky Young.
Well, I'm afraid it didn't change my mind. I am clear that I'm not supporting Theresa this evening. And it's not for any lack of admiration of her and undervaluing her commitment. But the situation we face is that the Conservative government has rather lost its authority to command the confidence of the House of Commons. And it's difficult to know how the government's going to carry on its business without completely refreshing its relationship with the DUP, because we haven't got an overall majority at the moment. We rely on the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party from Northern Ireland, to support the Conservative government, but they're very angry with Theresa May because of the deal that she brought back from the European Union, which they regard as a very deep betrayal of promises they made to them about the status of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom as we leave the European Union. And there is no sign that that breach can be repaired. She's gone back to Brussels to see what reassurances can be given, but there's no prospect of any substantial change in that draft agreement.
Sir Bernard Jenkin there talking to Vicky Young a little earlier. Well, I'm pleased to say that Henry Newman, the Director of Open Europe, is back with me, as is Dr. Catherine Haddon, Senior Fellow at the Institute of Government. It's one of those moments, isn't it now, where the Prime Minister goes back to Downing Street, sits there, waits for that call from Sir Graham Brady. There's nothing she can do.
No, and I mean, it's an extraordinary night, really. We're just sitting here waiting for these MPs to vote. Now we're waiting for the Conservative Party to go and count those votes. I mean, it's quite a strange case. Normally we're here for things like general elections, waiting for exit polls. There's a lot that goes around it, and this has been sort of put together in just a day to get to this vote.
I'm thinking, Henry, I mean, you used to be a political advisor, and when she came into Downing Street, she got rid of a lot of people who were around the Brexit camp, and she stripped away people who perhaps in these recent months might have been friendly to the Prime Minister. Do you think she's paying the price for the way that she's run her office over the last couple of years?
Perhaps. I think one of the problems that she's had is that she hasn't been able to explain the need for compromise in the Brexit process. And she could have, straight after the referendum, when she became Prime Minister, stood up and said, look, the Leave campaign tried to pretend this will all be very easy. It isn't going to be easy. But equally, the Remain campaign didn't fess up to the fact that actually the EU permeates many areas of our domestic life and our domestic laws. So look, this is going to be harder and it's going to take compromise. And then she could have done that again when she lost the general election, or lost a majority in the general election, had to rely on the DUP to get any bills through the Commons. But she hasn't done that, and I think it's perhaps inevitable that we're now seeing some of these challenges, and it's finally spilled out into the open. But it still seems that she'll win this tonight, and then she'll be able to continue as Prime Minister. But then the real problem starts: how does she get this Brexit deal through the Commons?
Somebody tweeted today that to be a Prime Minister, you've got to command either fear, love, respect, or you've got to show some competency. And on the first three elements of that, she's struggled because she doesn't have many friends, really, within the party. In terms of competency, that has been shredded in recent days by pulling the vote, sending ministers out to say the vote was coming when she knew that it wasn't. Has that been a problem? I mean, if it went against her tonight, will she look back at the last few days as where it all went wrong?
The problem is that Downing Street is just faced with many difficult options. There's no easy decision they can take. If the vote had gone ahead yesterday, she might have lost it by a very large margin and then had her leadership called into question anyway. So I think they're dealing with those problems. I think the Prime Minister is not a great salesperson. She's not able to articulate neatly the compromises or the advantages of her deal. But what she clearly is very tenacious. And I think everybody is able to respect that and see that she's in the Commons this week, last week, over in Brussels as well, speaking to European leaders. She's trying to do this, and nobody can fault her on that.
Yeah, and although they don't want her for the next general election, I mean, even Matt Hancock had sort of made that clear, and maybe he was one of those who'd told us so. Out in the country, there is some respect for the way she stuck at it.
I think if we look at her as a Prime Minister, the hours she's had to put in Parliament, answering questions, coming in with statements, she was there the last few weeks. She's had multiple sort of 3-hour sessions going through all of the questions that people had. It's probably more hours doing that kind of job in Parliament than many Prime Ministers who've been there a lot longer. But she will want to look at things, including the whip operation, because in the run-up to the meaningful vote, there were lots of talk about how she would get through. There seemed to be a lot of positive noises going there, and party management, that's crucial. And if you're not the kind of MP who likes to be in the tea rooms, who likes to be talking to MPs, you've really got to make sure that your whips are doing that kind of job for you.
And it doesn't get any easier, does it? Because she might be forgiven for having a cup of tea and putting her feet up if she wins the vote tonight, thinking, close one there. But tomorrow, she's off to Brussels to try and fight the 27 for something a little better.
Yeah, and that's one of the ironies of all of this, that it simply doesn't change the mass either in the House of Commons or indeed in Brussels, where the EU leaders are saying, look, this deal's settled, we've closed it, we're not reopening the withdrawal agreement, we'll help you around the edges, perhaps with political declarations, perhaps with something more legally binding, but it doesn't change any of that, ultimately, whoever the Prime Minister is.
Yeah, and of course everybody will be looking at the DUP after this vote tonight and saying, what are they going to do? If there is a vote of no confidence brought by the Labour Party and the opposition parties, are they going to fall in behind her if she continues with this deal?
Yeah, I mean, they said before that they want to wait for the meaningful vote. That got postponed. Whether or not they decide to jump ship earlier, that partly depends, though, on somebody putting down, i.e. Labour, putting down a vote of no confidence, which is the only other way in which, they can try and bring her down and bring down the government. And as we've talked about, that brings about other consequences, a general election.
So is it possible, then, because we had an SNP MP up here earlier saying, we are trying to force this, and even if she wins tonight, she might not be out of the woods. We could be back to the same situation within 14 days.
It will, but at some point or another, she will have to face up to whether or not this deal is going to get through, and if not, we're looking at no deal preparations, or we're looking at some other plan, and that involves looking for what kind of majority does exist in Parliament to get some deal through.
OK, Catherine, Henry, thank you very much for the moment. So in Committee Room 13 at the moment, they are busy counting the votes, perhaps recounting them as well. It is the margin of the victory, if it is a victory, that we will be looking at and commenting on in the hours ahead. We expect, if you're just joining us, that result to come in at around 9 o'clock. But let's cross in the meantime to the city and speak to our business editor, Simon Jack, who's there. It's been a pretty volatile day for the pound, Simon.
Yeah, it's been basically utter dismay tearing our hair out. Those are some of the things that business groups have been saying about what they see as a fresh hell of a leadership challenge against an already incredibly uncertain backdrop. We saw the pound fall quite sharply earlier in the week when she deferred that meaningful vote and kicked it into the new year. People thought they were definitely what one supermarket executive described to me as squeaky bum time. Having said that, today has actually been quite a strong day for the pound, because a lot of people taking MPs at their word that they were going to return the keys to number 10 to her tonight. So basically, one FX foreign exchange trader told me that a May win is priced in. Now, what that means is that if she loses, then you could see some quite sharp moves in the pound downwards, because at this time of night, this is the twilight hours for foreign exchange traders. Trading's pretty thin. It doesn't take that many sellers or buyers to move the market quite a lot. But even if she does win, as we are expecting, markets have a habit of then focusing on what's next in line. And what is next in line is back to where we were. A deal that very few business leaders, very few MPs think she can get through Parliament, and that poses all the same questions again. What can businesses do to prepare? They start spending a little less, they start hiring fewer people. It is very corrosive to the animal spirits that businesses like if they're going to proceed and continue to invest. So as I say, keep your eye on the pound. That's always the canary in the confidence coal mine. But even if she wins, I wouldn't expect any massive gains. This is still a backdrop where businesses, investors are looking at this possible vote of confidence tabled by Labour. She's going to be wounded one way or another. So I would not expect a surge of confidence in financial markets, even if she does get the win that we are expecting.
Yes, I'm full of pity for you, Simon, because I know it's always 1 degree or 2 degrees colder in the City of London than it is over here in Westminster. So thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's bring in Robin Walker, the Brexit Minister, who's joined us here. Thank you very much for being with us. How do you expect this will go?
I think the Prime Minister will win. I think we will see probably 2/3 of the party backing her.
As much as that?
I mean, I'm confident that she will see that, because I think she's had a very good day today. She did well at PMQs. She had a strong performance at the 22. But more importantly, I think actually most colleagues recognise that the public out there want us to see this process through. And what I've heard today from my constituents is a chorus of people, many of whom aren't supporters of our party, saying actually we want the Prime Minister to stay, to see this process through to the end, and to make sure that actually she does deliver on what people voted for in the referendum. I think that's crucial.
But she's had to tell everyone tonight that she's not going to fight on to the 2022 election. Have you been involved in the conversations with her that's just not possible?
I was at the 22 when she said that. I was in some ways sorry to hear it, but I think we all recognise, and I think the reasons why we chose Theresa May as leader for our party was to bring the party together, to see us through what many of us recognise would be a difficult and challenging process of negotiations with the European Union, to bring her considerable experience of tough negotiations to bear on that. It wasn't to win elections, and I think we saw in 2017 that actually the election did not go as planned, and so I think it's reasonable for her to set out to a party that what she wants to do is do exactly what she was elected to do, to see this process through to its conclusion, to deliver for the country, and then step aside and allow someone else to take the party forward. I think that's a magnanimous thing for her to do. Obviously wasn't an easy decision for her to reach, but I think it's something that the party should now get behind her and support her in seeing that through.
Yeah. Are you going to Brussels tomorrow?
No, I won't be.
Is the Brexit Secretary?
I think the Prime Minister is getting out there and leading on this very personally, very directly, but our department, meanwhile, is doing a huge amount of work, both to prepare
Is
for
it
the next
because the
stage of
concern has always
negotiations.
been that the Brexit secretaries are not involved in what is going on, and that's been part of the problem?
No, I don't think that is the case. I mean, I think we saw for a very long period of time in the negotiations on the withdrawal agreement, David Davis playing a very active part in that. But of course it's right, when we're talking about an issue of this huge importance, that the Prime Minister should lead from the front and the Cabinet has to take key decisions. So I've worked in the department from the very start of this process. I've seen that there are parallel tracks of work going on, both to prepare for a deal and to support the negotiations, but also to make sure we have the necessary preparations in place for no deal. It's not the outcome we want, but it of course is the responsibility of the government to prepare for those. Both of those tracks are continuing. We are preparing, and a lot of the work that I do is preparing for the next stage of negotiations, delivering on the future.
And you've just got some extra money for that, because, let's face it, we've been talking about it all night. Whatever happens here with this vote in the leadership contest, it doesn't change the mass across the road, and unless you get something more than Brussels seems to be offering at the moment, then nobody really sees how you get this deal through the House of Commons.
I think there's a lot of debate in the House of Commons in which people are making their own personal best the enemy of the good. I think we have in front of us a good deal. We need to make sure we see that through. But of course it's right that the Prime Minister has listened to the concerns of colleagues across the House about the backstop, and she's going back and fighting our corner to get something better, to get clear guidance on that means we won't have to go into it and we can be clear how we get out of it. I think
well, that's the point. That's the crux, isn't it? If you can't get a mechanism to withdraw unilaterally from that backstop or get an end date to it, the DUP aren't going to vote for it, and you don't have a majority to get it through.
And I think it's very important that we listen to the concerns that the DUP have and we deliver on those. But we also have to remember that we're talking about here some of our commitments as the UK. These are commitments in international treaties, commitments as part of the Good Friday Agreement, which is crucial to the peace process, and we want to meet all of those commitments. So I think sometimes this gets misrepresented as something that the UK didn't ask for. We do want to make sure that we don't have to have any kind of a hard border in the island of Ireland. We also want to make sure we protect the territorial integrity of the United Kingdom. I think actually the Prime Minister's won a huge fight on that in making sure that Northern Ireland isn't put into a separate customs area, but she's clear she wants to go further, she wants to improve it, and she wants to address the concerns that the DUP and others have raised in the House.
And just a quick final one, she was supposed to be in Dublin today speaking to the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar. That was postponed. Is he the key to this, really? Is it him that you have to convince?
I think the Irish are very important in all of this. I also think they're going to be key allies when we move forward into the discussions on the future relationship. It is hugely in Ireland's interest that the UK should have a successful trading relationship with the EU. Ireland benefits from that enormously, and so I think what we will find is that whereas some of the politics of this have been difficult and have been sometimes confrontational during the process of the withdrawal agreement, once we can move on and move forward into the future relationship, actually Ireland's interests are in lockstep with ours. The crucial Rubicon we have to cross in order to do that is to address this issue of backstop, make sure there is something that the whole House can get behind and support. But I think that is in sight, and that will secure the certainty that businesses want in ensuring we have an implementation period. It'll secure a clear, orderly withdrawal from the EU, and it will allow me, as someone who represents a constituency that voted leave, to show my constituents we are actually delivering on the outcome of the referendum.
Minister, you're remaining optimistic. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Robin Walker there, the Brexit Minister. Well, let's go to Brussels because they are rolling out the red carpets. They are preparing for the next European summit, and Adam Fleming is there for us. And Thursday, of course, as Donald Tusk has told us, Adam, is going to be a Brexit day.
Yeah, so Brexit wasn't originally on the schedule for this EU summit, the last one of the year, but it was added by Donald Tusk, the President of the European Council, a couple of days ago. And everyone's focus in Brussels is not on what's happening where you are, but the meeting that they're preparing for tomorrow. And the working assumption is that Theresa May is going to turn up here as the British Prime Minister, and not as a caretaker or someone who's going to be out of a job soon, but somebody who is still taking the Brexit deal through Parliament. And it is that process of getting the Brexit deal through Parliament where, in Brussels' eyes, the fundamentals have not changed. This was a deal that was negotiated by Theresa May, but endorsed by the entire cabinet. So it's the UK government's deal, not Theresa May's deal. Also, this idea that there would be a better deal on offer if there was a better Prime Minister, quote unquote, on offer. Brussels pours cold water on that as well. They say they've gone as far as they can. The deal is the deal and it's not going to be renegotiated. And then the other fundamental thing here is the arithmetic in Parliament, that the blockage is in Parliament, and no change of personnel in Brussels' view can really change that. And so now the focus here is on what Theresa May is potentially going to ask for in terms of reassurance that she can give Parliament. Remember, in the dim and distant history of yesterday, that was what everything was about. What words could Theresa May extract from Brussels that would help her sell the deal? And everyone's looking at what those words are going to be, what she's going to ask, and then what the EU can offer that is both politically palatable and legal. And I have to say, from what I'm hearing, I don't think they're going to offer very much, and they're certainly not going to offer anything we haven't heard before. The idea at the moment is that it's just going to be a restatement of the bits of the Brexit withdrawal agreement, the divorce treaty, and the political declaration spelling out the shape of the future relationship. Just taking all the bits of those documents that suggest the Northern Irish backstop is never going to be needed, and everyone's going to work really super hard to make that the case, but just shoving them all together into one big new document, which won't be legally binding, but it will be something in black and white that Theresa May will be able to go back to London with.
Yeah, big question is, will it satisfy those who don't want to support it at the moment? We shall see. Adam Fleming, thank you very much indeed. Well, we've been getting some reaction through the evening from the grassroots. Let's go live again to Sale in Greater Manchester, and Rita Chakrabarti is there. Hello, Rita.
Hello, Christian. Yes, well, of course, only one topic of conversation here tonight, which is that ballot that's going on, and people, of course, checking their phones and social media all the time to see if there's any result. There is, I think, by and large, support for Theresa May to continue as leader here amongst everyone here tonight. It's not unanimous, but by and large, you do hope that she will continue. Angela Stone, you're a candidate here in Sale, and you are hoping that Theresa May will pull this off tonight. You've been speaking to people out and about today. What have they been saying about what's been going on?
Yes, I have. I've been out in my ward today, and people are kind of a little bit confused as to why MPs have put in their letters at this time, because they think it's wrong. People, by and large, I mean, as a ward, we voted Remain. But what we found is that people are sort of talking about the fact that they've accepted that now, and they want to move on and they want to get a result. And what they're seeing is that Theresa May is the person to do that, that she should be supported tonight.
You say move on and get a result, but she was precisely unable to move on and get a result because she couldn't get her deal through the Commons.
That's something that will come on to, but to actually do what's happened today has stopped that happening. So it's put a spanner in the works, if you like, as far as the residents I've been talking to are concerned. And they would just like to see things settle down and things go through.
Okay. Trevor Stone, what's your